Evil is evil, strikable. Lesser, greater, middling. If I have to choose between one evil and another, then I prefer not to choose at all.
So sorry, but I just remembered I left my cat on the stove.
At least conjure me up some decent food before we get to God.
Leave the very sexy but insane witch to her inevitable demise.
Witcher! This is madness!
He was in some trouble.
What kind of trouble?
This fire comes after him.
You turned my friend into a slug.
You're my blood, and that is a bond that is stronger than all others.
Oops! He is the most beautiful.
What the hell is even that?
It's magic. It's not real.
Shut up!
I killed a rat this morning with my breakfast fork.
Stupid witcher. We're tied by destiny.
Destiny can go.
It's all wrong!
The Witcher, at its core, is a dark fairy tale brimming with critical subtext and complex political intrigue. The saga tells the tale of empires, kingdoms, and magical clandestine organizations who vie for control of a princess blessed with magical elder blood. An alchemically enhanced mutant monster slayer, or witcher, takes the princess in under his care when she is a child after her kingdom is invaded by an aggressively expanding empire. Due to a supernatural or perhaps superstitious bargain made on a whim, the Witcher is seemingly linked to her by destiny, but their bond grows far deeper than that of merely caretaker and ward. Those who seek to control the princess wish to exploit her extraordinary potential for their own selfish and oftentimes cruel designs. Yet such well-laid plans could never account for the chaos sown from the fatherly love and devotion of a Witcher, his companions, and the wrath brought from his silver sword. The Witcher is a series that sometimes enjoys the inversion of common fantasy tropes. It is a series that at times prefers to focus on the intricacies surrounding found family rather than obsess over the battle between the forces of light and dark. It ultimately tells the tale about the struggle for survival in a brutal, unjust, and unforgiving world and... No, Netflix did not adapt this story.
Hello there, and welcome to my channel. I'm the Eternal, and I'm about to cry about a bad TV show for a good little while, so if you enjoy what you're about to watch, don't forget to like and subscribe. But before I begin with all that though, I want to ask you a question, so why don't you come here? Have you heard about a show called The Witcher on Netflix? Right, yeah, the one with Henry Cavil and the monsters and magic and all that stuff. Right, well, did you know that that show is a complete piece of shit? I don't think I have ever been as disappointed about a show as I am about The Witcher. And yeah, I know, I'm late to the YouTube hate party, but I literally just got over an illness where I binge-watched all 3 seasons, and after all that pain, I felt a strong compulsion to say something about it.
Call an ambulance! But not for me!
Now look, The Witcher definitely isn't the worst show ever made, but not being the worst show I've ever seen doesn't mean it wasn't the most disappointing, because this could have been an incredible show.
What are you doing? Killing monsters.
What happened with you? You motherfucking goat. I am Torque, the Sylvan, a rare and intelligent creature! You're a dick. With balls.
The creators, though, decided to punt away any hopes for this show's greatness into the stratosphere from the very first episode, and believe me, it all just goes downhill from there.
What glorious pain we could create together.
Geralt? Yennefer told me to...
Now, after doing some well, let's just call it majorly thorough research, I've come to the conclusion that the people involved in the production of this series didn't really have any idea about what direction they wanted to take it in. Was this going to be an epic fantasy that would set a new bar for the genre? Well, then it would have to take itself seriously and rush nothing to provide the depth and narrative sophistication to achieve such high aspirations. Or, hey, this could have just turned out to be a silly but fun and enjoyable little adventure show like Hercules from the 90s.
Wait a minute. This isn't my world. Disappointed!
But, like, much better. Cause, yeah, fine. That wouldn't be the best direction to take a show in, but it wouldn't be the worst either. It definitely wouldn't be as bad as if they made some hellspawn mixture of those two types of shows. That would be really bad, wouldn't it?
You know the problem with you mages?
What?
You're too bloody serious.
My sweet child.
Wow.
So when I saw that Henry Cavil was playing the lead role for the series, I thought, wow, that's Superman, that's an A-list actor, that's surely going to lead to quality, right? Right? And then I remembered what those movies were like. The Snyderverse simply existing kind of points out that that logic doesn't exactly track, so no, Henry Cavill did not indeed guarantee the overall quality of the show. He did give a serious attempt at the portrayal of the series as protagonist, which, hey, though it wasn't perfect, it wasn't awful either. So yeah, this show sucked, there's no denying it, but just how and why did that turn out to be the case? The acting is middling at best, though there are some actors who provide exceptions to this and give some truly standout performances.
I would have done anything to make her smile.
And this show is not that much of a looker most of the time either, though admittedly, there are moments where I can see they put some money into it, and fine. Yeah, at those times, it does have the look of a great show. But all that doesn't matter. This could have been the best acted, best looking show ever, but still would have been a massive trash fire because the writing and the overall tone or feel of the series truly ruins the experience. Now let me be clear here and say that this show adapted an already successful series of novels and short stories that had previously been adapted into an incredibly successful series of games. They didn't exactly have to reinvent the wheel to come up with something compelling here, nor did they have to try real hard to get a few of the core concepts in this universe right either. But guess what happened?
Fire magic is off limits for us. You turned my friend into a slug.
Come here.
All this show's success required was a little bit of copy and pasting, maybe a tiny bit of cutting, a little bit of reading between the lines here and there, and bam! They had a good show on their hands, perhaps even a great one, but the creators behind this production failed hard to portray, let alone understand the essence of what made those books this show was based on engaging to begin with. So what we get at the end of the viewer's experience is pure disappointment in the shadow of what could have been. Because if The Witcher were put into the hands of someone who truly cared for or understood the source material, well, we could have had something great. So what is this video going to be about? What is it exactly that I'm here to tell you? In all my hours of deep contemplation about what made this show suck so bad, I struggled to truly understand what key factor led to it feeling dead on arrival to me. And then, an answer came to me that was infinitely simple yet profoundly complex. What I was left with at the end of the Witcher watching experience, aside from a sour taste in my mouth and a curious itch in the nethers, was a concept in its purest, most irritating form. Contradiction. I have here a list of contradictions, inconsistencies, and mistakes that pretty much incontrovertibly prove that The Witcher is a steaming pile of horse manure of a show and is its own worst enemy. This list enumerates the many, varying, countless, alarming, frustrating 10 contradictions and mistakes that I believe ruin The Witcher's potential to make it the most disappointing show ever made. However, Before we go forward with that list, I'm kind of operating under the assumption that you've already watched this show and will have some ideas about what and sometimes even who I'm talking about. But if not...
You're off the edge of the map, mate. Here there be spoilers.
I will spoil this entire series until the end of Season 3, so yeah. Take all that as your spoiler warning. Next, for clarity I guess, I gotta admit that I'm quite a fan of the Witcher universe. I loved the trilogy of games. I loved the books, especially the short stories, especially the audiobook versions of those short stories. I think the Gwent-related titles that CDPR have produced, Thronebreaker in particular, are pretty dang fun too. So hey, I'm basically a Witcher nerd. Do with that what you will. Then, with that little confession out of the way, before you call me all nitpicky or something, yes, I own that. I am here to pick the nits.
I see you Witcher apologists out there, rubbing together your 4 remaining brain cells, trying to come up with excuses for the sorry state of the show. Pipe down, it's not gonna work, you're not convincing anyone. Plus, I wouldn't be surprised if 2 of those 4 remaining brain cells you had left were occupied with playing toss a coin to your Witcher to yourself on repeat, so you just don't have the bandwidth left to try and fight me on this.
Oh, right, you think the show is kind of fun, actually. Okay, well, you know what? You and your bad taste can go...
Put an egg in your shoe and beat it.
Anyone who likes this show is wrong and stupid, and I'm going to prove that to you over the course of this video. Yet right before we go off on that fun little adventure together, I have one last thing to get out of the way. Just so this video isn't entirely negative, I want to point out a few things that I actually liked or enjoyed whilst watching this series. So, without further ado, here we go.
And now, it's the happy, positive fun time with the Eternal. To start things off,
these title card icon things that start the show out are nicely designed in my opinion. They tend to suit the central theme of each episode and have a cool etched metal look to them, so good job to whoever designed them. Moving on, some of the character dynamics in this show do work, and though there's a big part of me that wants to point out that that's carried by the actors rather than the writing, let's not get too negative just yet. Because on the topic of character dynamics, I truly feel like almost all of the romances work in this show. Almost all. Not all. To the series' credit, the romance that's the most convincing is fortunately the one between the main characters, Geralt of Rivia, our titular Witcher, and Yennefer of Vengerberg, his sorceress lover. It is easily the most convincingly portrayed romance on screen, whilst the one between the sorceress Tissaia de Vries, Yennefer's mother figure, and the sorcerer Vilgefortz comes in at a close, tragic second. Next up, the fight scenes can get kind of cool in this show. Some of them are truly impressive, especially the one between the conniving, immaculately groomed, kimono-donning, guyliner-sporting, staff-wielding Vilgefortz and our very own Geralt of Rivia.
Whoa, know what the hardest part was? Holding.
Now that was cool. These actors clearly worked hard with all this choreography, and for moments like this, that hard work truly paid off. Then there's the Princess Cirilla's skill progression as a fighter and monster slayer. Now, it's not perfect, and as with many things in this show, it does feel rushed and could have been expanded upon a tiny bit more, and yeah, they take it a bit far in the end. But I can say that after a repeat viewing, her skill progression actually feels pretty earned. They show her training and failing at things for a while in this show before she gets good at anything. And I think I can speak for everyone when I say we all appreciate when characters put in the work to get stronger. The cheesier the montage, the better. I especially love that her training culminates in a moment like this, where she doesn't even hesitate before springing into battle the moment danger appears. And I gotta say, this part of that scene was really nicely done. What follows afterwards, though, is pretty goddamn stupid. Next up, though I mostly hate the writing in this show, I feel that some of the lines here and there were really well written.
You lecture me on a mother's love, yet offer up someone else's daughter.
Queen to all of Sintra, grandmother to one.
Monsters are born of deeds done. Unforgivable ones.
For all it brightens, love casts long shadows.
Now, those were some really good lines, huh? Even I have to admit, some of the writing there was top-notch. But I'm done with saying good things now. That whole positive section, that's done. The good times are over, baby. It's time to begin. One, the Netflix paradox. To start this list off nice and simple, I'm gonna say this. This show is bad because it is a Netflix adaptation. Now don't get me wrong, I don't hate Netflix. I love Netflix. It's got some great shows, some great original shows. Overall, I think it's a fine service in general. It's just that their adaptations kinda suck butt sometimes, you know? There's a reason for the meme, guys. This company is committed to churning out content, and they just don't care if that content is good or bad anymore. This has been the case for a long while now. We all know this, but we keep on hoping that this all may hopefully improve someday soon. But I've got bad news for you. It won't unless something major changes. When someone makes a show for Netflix as opposed to, say, HBO, I'm pretty sure they go into it with the idea that they are just making casual entertainment, because I doubt the executives over at Netflix care enough to incentivize anything other than quantity over quality. You can physically see this concept in action when you take a critical eye to many of the varying Netflix adaptations there are out there. They always appear to scream mid-quality no matter the budget or the production time, and that goes for both the aesthetics and the general direction of the narrative of whatever you're watching. The Witcher is a show that desperately needed more episodes and time to flesh out its characters, world, and narrative. It's a show that required more love, attention, and passion. A show that just needed more, but Netflix. And fine, in all fairness, there are exceptions to the whole Netflix adaptation being bad thing. However, these shows that are already uncommon are the exceptions to the rule, because for every Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events, or Arcane, or Cuphead, which are excellent adaptations of already established properties, I will admit, there's a Cowboy Bebop, Resident Evil, and Full Metal Alchemist out there to remind you that making a quality adaptation is hard work. The Witcher simply followed course here, destined to be a poor adaptation, bound by the seemingly divinely mandated law that dictates that a property on Netflix must be ruined by virtue of being a property on Netflix. It is bad because it is on Netflix. Albert Einstein. And so we have our first contradiction of sorts. Netflix chose to adapt a popular property that was already good and made it bad because Netflix cannot help but make bad adaptations, even though it goes against their best interests to do so. And this is exactly what happened with The Witcher. 2. Is this The Witcher? Now, I know this show is called The Witcher, but a lot of the time it doesn't feel like the showrunners were even trying to adapt the source material. It's no secret by now that a few of the writers didn't exactly like the books, but what little material the series has drawn from them feels hurried, overlooked, or at worst, misunderstood. In fact, the last season of this show goes out of its way to give the main character of the series, Geralt of Rivia, you know, the actual Witcher, far less attention than he deserves. The book's version of Geralt is actually quite an interesting lens through which to view this world of monstrous kings and sympathetic cursed creatures, at least to start with. Yet not only is his character simplified to be this solely dry and grumpy person.
And now, Witcher, it's time to repay your debt.
Fuck off, bud.
To have less of a personality in general, really. He also gets overshadowed by and purposefully sidelined for the other main characters of the series. The coquettish and sometimes cruel sorceress Yennefer of Vengerberg, Geralt's aforementioned love interest, and Princess Cirilla of Cintra, or Ciri for short. A girl seemingly linked to Geralt by destiny. When The Witcher is doing his own thing, the show is okay. And I mean okay. But the series is at its worst when the creators feel confident enough to do their own thing. You see, Ciri and Yennefer are given a lot of filler content that doesn't exactly feel entirely thought through.
Stop.
I wish I could.
Did my girlfriend just steal my daughter?
At times, it feels like the writers just rough drafted their thoughts on the back of a napkin at lunch someday, and then when filming began, all they turned up to work with were some crumbs and a few partially scribbled notes, and they just ran with it. The additions they made to the plot they were adapting serve no purpose other than to undermine the show's potential, as they are mostly, in a single word, bedwrong stupid. These two are either interjected into stories they have no business or purpose in, or have their intended more relevant plot points frustratingly delayed to appease the writers' delusions that they were actually doing something. Gotta convince the higher-ups that you earned your paycheck somehow, right? Aside from the showrunner's incredibly low level of commitment to adapting the books faithfully both in tone and text, I want to point out that there's very little witchering business in this show called The Witcher either. To explain, a witcher is a mostly solitary slayer of, or dealer with, monsters. When a witcher does this, he engages in what people refer to as a contract or hunt. The books and games version of Geralt usually accomplishes this already difficult task whilst experiencing some unique context. What sort of context, I hear you ask? Well, it depends. It could be a civil turmoil sparked on by religious fanatics, or it could be a magical restriction placed on him by an evil entity that would make an otherwise more manageable task far more difficult. Or hey, sometimes there's just a cute little romance and that's all that's needed to elevate the narrative. It would have been nice if the show followed this simple yet enjoyable formula for a little while, but no. These unique circumstances that take place in the books and games give us some insight into the exceptional nature of the strange continent in which the Witcher inhabits. Also, they cast light onto the twisted, cruel, and oftentimes unfortunate nature of chaotic magic. Yet in the show, Geralt kills or deals with less and less monsters as the series progresses. At most times, monsters exist as 30 to 90 second poorly CGI'd obstacles for the Witcher to overcome, usually with a backwards thrust of his sword. Whoa. He wasn't even looking in its direction. How did he do that? That is so cool. I'm not even kidding. How did he do that? I'm kidding. And fine, it actually is pretty cool. Now, all this lack of witchering business would be fine if the plot of the original books were adapted faithfully, but at most times, Geralt seems directionless. This is especially the case during the unnecessary additions the writers made to the story. During those times, he's forced to hover around stupid plot points that weigh him down too early or push him to act like he has little to no agency outside of what the writers need him to do for the other main characters they seem to like more. He's just thrown around the continent at the whims of the writers' collective fancy, as if they were some law of the universe akin to destiny itself. We barely get to see who Geralt really is before he's burdened with the plot of having to chase after, care for, and sort of adopt a whole-ass grown-ass daughter, so he gets a tragically small amount of time devoted towards his own character development. And it's sad to say, but Geralt feels oddly missing from and somewhat irrelevant to his own show by the end of Season 3. But even before that, I can only think of one single episode where a monster-slaying contract of sorts is only partially at the center of the story, and God do they mess that one up. But we'll get to that in greater detail later. Because first, let me explain what a Witcher even is. Witchers are humans that are mutated and surgically enhanced for the purpose of making them the perfect monster slayers. They are meant to be and look like vagrant vagabonds that people can spot from a mile away because of how ghastly, or at the very least strange, they look. Does this look like a freak the average tavern crawler would choose to cast out? No, that is your run-of-the-mill sword-wielding fantasy character. How about this? And let's just say Henry Cavil was not made to look like the most mutated looking mutant there is. I'll admit, the third game in the Witcher trilogy is guilty of making Geralt look less strange as well, at least in comparison to its predecessors, but the show only seems to focus on like 2 things to make Geralt look different or mutated at all. Sometimes, yes, his eyes do pop and look otherworldly, but they're meant to look like cat's eyes with vertical slits and whatnot. They're not meant to be just yellow. These ain't no puss peepers, that's for sure.
Puss peepers?
Then there's his kind of white, kind of grey hair, which, come on, let's be honest, it looks quite natural. For all anyone knows, in a dark tavern, this guy could just be a dude who aged super well or super early. There's nothing freakish looking about him really until he pops a potion, and then he looks like this. Freaky, I know, but other than those 2 things though, he does look normal. In the very first episode, he walks into a bar and almost everyone is just mean to him for no apparent reason, even though he looks like less of a freak than some other people in there. This guy, who genuinely looks like more of a mutant than he does, says, "You don't give the orders around here, you mutant son of a bitch." And it doesn't exactly feel appropriate, cause yeah, look at him. So I gotta ask, is it the white hair that gives it away then? Do they treat every old man who has grayish whitish hair like this? I mean, think about it. Some poor sweet old man strolls into a tavern and goes, "Oh, hello there, young barkeep. May I have a cup of your finest wine, please?"
You don't give the orders around here. You mutant son of a...
But on a more serious note, they didn't seem to think their portrayal of witchers in general through for this show. At times, people see them as vile abominations and freaks of nature.
My mother says you're the offspring of foul sorcery, a diabolic creation, filthy degenerate born of hell. Have you ever been to hell?
But at other times, they trustingly and freely give them coin for a job up front.
In advance, I'd pay you 100 ducats.
I mean, some coherence and consistency would have been appreciated here, but that would have required real effort and thought in the writing department. And as you will soon see, effort was what was lacking. And yeah, look, if they wanted to show that some regions are more amenable to witchers, or that desperate times call for desperate measures, fine, but they had to portray that effectively, not seemingly arbitrarily, so they failed at a fundamental component of world building. And thus we come to the Witchers, as they don't give them the best treatment here, to say the least. For you see, the show is called The Witcher, but it doesn't seem to understand what a Witcher is. It gets minor parts of their aesthetics right at times, but misses the opportunity to portray them as something special, something to look out for or even look up to. And nothing proves this point more than the other Witchers in this world, who do an incredible job at coming across as your average, regular Joes. Now, the Witcher's base is in a supposedly secluded mountain keep named Kaer Morhen, where— Oh, did you notice the way I said supposedly just now? I did that because it doesn't seem to be that much of a secret keep at the end of the day, as they, have guests over when we first meet them. When I watched this episode for the first time, I genuinely suspected a plot twist where these women were going to turn out to be monsters or assassins sent there to kill the Witchers or something. Because it made no logical sense for all these women whose livelihood likely rely on a steady supply of horned up dudes, to be so close by as to be casually invited up to an isolated castle almost lost to time. Anyway though, whether it's during that party, earlier or later, these losers that are sorry excuses for Witchers get absolutely bodied by almost every monster they come across, and then we never really get to see them again. We don't ever get the chance to witness any semblance of a non-main character Witcher's competence, so we can't come to respect what the average Witcher is capable of, which is just disappointing to say the least. These other lesser Witchers come across as just as powerless to monsters as anybody else would, which is a huge shame obviously, and more importantly undermines this show's sense of world building and overall cool factor to this immeasurable degree. Yet returning to the Witcher, Geralt, I have one last thing to say. They messed with and blatantly messed up many of Geralt's relationships, but none more so than that with his best friend, Jaskier, or Dandelion as I'm going to refer to him from time to time. Blame the games on that. Geralt treats this guy terribly for most of this show. In fact, my boy Dandelion gets done so dirty by this show in general that I myself feel personally wronged by it all. The writers treat this bard with about as much respect as Geralt does right here.
Come here.
Yeah.
Come on, Roach.
Dandelion is actually Geralt's best friend. They understand each other quite well. They hang out together all the time and go on interesting adventures whenever it suits them. They do all this whilst sharing their unique perspectives and insights on the world and even on each other as people. This not only helps inform the audience about the witchery world in which they live, but who doesn't love a good old buddy-buddy chalk and cheese adventure story, huh? Jaskier is meant to be quite brave and can be quite witty in the books. He plays the part of an annoying dude in distress at times, sure, but the fact that he goes along on witcher hunts, is loyal enough to take a beating and not spill his beans, and is quite sought after by women from all over the continent is either played down or played for laughs in the show when really it shouldn't have been. The games don't do Dandelion very much justice in this regard either, to be honest, but the games are good and this show is bad. But in either case, he is a character that deserved far more respect. Instead, he ends up being the butt of many a joke, and I use the word joke liberally here because they don't tend to be all that funny.
When I was a lass, my playmate had a little brother that was born with no ears, deaf as a post. I'd give anything to switch places with him right now.
The audience for his music seem to hate it for no apparent reason, except that maybe it's kind of funny to hate on the guy who doesn't want to be hated on, I guess? I don't know. He's portrayed to be the sort of clown who speaks to rats.
Guys, your harmonies were a little pitchy.
And they give him the most flat, the flattestest, reasonless on-screen romance I've seen on-screen in a long while. Awful romance aside, though the show does lead up to a point where Geralt finally starts to appreciate Jaskier's friendship, they give it no time to flourish in the first place and make them seem more like passing acquaintances rather than close friends. By the point in the show that Dandelion forgives Geralt for undervaluing their friendship in an incredibly callous way, it had not been built up enough to warrant their contrived separation in the first place.
That's what friends do. They come back.
And I'm sorry, Jaskier.
Oh, you are always so emotional.
Even with that in consideration, at the end of the day, Geralt's apology comes across as too little too late. I say all this because the relationship gets so bad at times in this show that it genuinely made me question why Jaskier even cares for Geralt at all, because Geralt is so prickly towards the person that's supposed to be his best friend that it's just uncomfortable to watch at times.
Damn it, Jaskier! Why is it whenever I find myself in a pile of shit these days, it's you shoveling it?
I mean, the only explanation for this would be if the writers actually bought into the Witcher lore's propaganda that they are just cold and unfeeling creatures that have no hearts. The free-spirited bard and the mutant monster slayer are friends, not because they see a use in one another, but because their personalities fit. The bard is drawn to the raw, poetically solitary nature of the Witcher,
who is, in fact, often in the mood for mischief and adventure.
whilst the Witcher sees in the bard's freeness of spirit true acceptance for who he is and warm company for all that mischief and adventure he wants to get into.
Food, women, and wine, Geralt.
So there we have it. The show undermines Geralt as a character, doesn't understand Witchers in general, and loses a lot of necessary emphasis on the dark monster hunts and mysteries that make this universe so compelling to begin with. Whilst doing all that, it misunderstands the core character dynamics that make this world and these people interesting to experience in the first place. And all that makes you wonder, just how much was put into this show? 3. How much did this thing cast? This series really manages to look truly awful at times, and I cannot for the life of me understand why. From the exceedingly blurry backgrounds in some shots, even to how some scenes are juxtaposed with one another. I don't know if this show looks this bad because of poor direction, poor lighting and design, or because of a lack of budget, because yeah, I'm not one of those people that can discern that sort of stuff. I just know that this show looks cheap a lot of the time. And I know this is a strange point to make, but bear with me here. But doesn't this show look like it has both way too high yet way too low of a budget at the same time? It goes from looking like this to looking like this. And then, of course, there are the monsters. Look at these guys. They look so awful yet weirdly ambitious. If only the budget were slightly higher, then maybe these monsters would have looked amazing. But it wasn't that high, I guess. I suppose it's weirdly unfortunate for the show that the finances weren't low enough to force the creators' hands into doing something more, well, creative with their fantastic beasts. What we get instead is an over-reliance on not-so-great CGI that's all too common in media these days. What they should have done was put way more emphasis into practical effects and just simplified some of the monster designs. Yet, when complaining about some of the aesthetics, I can't help but praise the small visual upgrades they made to certain aspects of the show as it progressed.
Despite the very existence of such changes breaking continuity a bit.
Yet those minor improvements to the show are few and far between, because, as I mentioned earlier, Netflix. Oh, Netflix. All their properties have this specific look that I can't quite put my finger on and describe perfectly just yet, but what I can say is that it's mostly not that great of a look. Netflix shows have this very mid-range aesthetic to them. I don't know if it's an in-house studio thing, I don't know if it's a mandated look so that every show will have the same Netflix appearance no matter the screen, but whatever it is, The Witcher doesn't seem to escape that disappointing general aesthetic and feel ever, save for flashes of something more here and there. Perhaps a little more money was needed to bring the vision the creators had for this show to life, but who knows? They clearly had some money going into this though, right? The fact that they got an A-list actor like Henry Cavil on couldn't have been cheap, but then again they didn't bring on another A-lister to share the screen with him. Don't get me wrong, the other actors are fine I guess, but there's no other heavy-hitting scenery chore to draw an audience in merely by their performance or celebrity alone, which is a shame. But what's clear to see though is that they just didn't put as much money as they should have into this show. I can't imagine that they gave this thing that high of a budget actually, considering the limited known cast members and its general lackluster aesthetic. So give me a second here whilst I open up Google and never mind what you just saw, okay? Let's just see how much they spent on this thing. Okay, so Netflix, Witcher budget, and oh my god! That cast though! When I mention the cast here, I want to be clear that if the show was way better, bar like 1 or 2 people, the casting wouldn't have been that much of a problem for me. But with that said, the casting is all wrong.
It's all wrong!
Anya Chalotra is a great actress, don't get me wrong. I think her performance as Yennefer is filled to the brim with believable emotion, and she does bring what was written for her to life. Miana Buring, who plays Tisea, does a good job too, I guess, so their dynamic works for the most part, aside from narratively, but we'll get to that later. Henry Cavill's Geralt lacks a bit of the charm the Geralt from the books has, but his performance is solid for sure. And finally, Jodie May's Calanthe, though performed a little too languidly for my liking, gives us the right amount of imperious mixed with charismatic for her character to be one that ultimately works. But that's about it. Everyone else's performance goes from just alright to pretty awful. But hey, wait a second. There's pretty bad, and then there's the performance of Milva.
You'd be dead now. Go back to bed, Witcher.
Ugh, God, Milva. I don't know why, but the way she says Witcher annoys me for some reason.
Witcher. Ask the wrong question, they will string you up. And then how would we have these lovely daily chats? Witcher. Grouse? Witcher.
Give me the damn grouse.
Oh, now you want it. Witcher.
It's a very weird energy between you two.
I'm being mean here, but her performance is really not good, especially for someone who is going to be quite central to the plot moving forward. Does this performance make the actress a bad one? No, but it doesn't help her case either. But my issues with the casting doesn't stop there, because the actress who plays Ciri is just too old for this kind of story. Would a child actor have been worse than Freya Allan? Most certainly. However, Ciri is meant to be like 11 in the books during the first season. So this coming-of-age story where she pretty much gets adopted by 2 unrelated adults comes across as pretty weird when the actress who plays her is an adult herself. Imagine just walking into a college and adopting a random person. You are my baby now, sir. Come with me. The actress who plays Ciri is just too old, a fact that leads to YouTube videos like this one where people speculate whether Henry Cavill flirt with Freya Allan.
They're meant to be father and daughter, stop it. That's so gross, stop.
Anyway, back to the casting. No 2 people look, or at the very least sound, like they're from the same region.
Look at you in your little cloak. And her wretched family.
Mother, stop. Wasn't Queen Calanthe's fault.
These 2 come from Ciri's kingdom but sound vaguely European, whilst Ciri and her grandma sound like your regular fantasy British folks.
You will rule this land someday.
Die.
Sweet child. When I go, it will be far more dramatic than this.
These 2 are related somehow, and this is Ciri's great-great-great-great-great-grandma. So yeah, you get the picture. This is all fine in terms of progressivism in casting, but it honestly comes across as a little ineffective and unfitting when the setting is an Eastern European medieval fantasy. People from different regions look different for varying reasons, and that's not an inherently bad thing, guys. Even M. Night Shyamalan understood that, and I don't ever want to be talking about anything nice about what he did with The Last Airbender.
My name is Ang. And I'm the Avatar.
How dare you! Beyond the neutral casting though, everyone looks a tiny bit off in this show, like they shouldn't look like they do. I can't tell you why I feel this way, I just do. I don't know if it's the specific actors that were cast, their hair and makeup, or something else. But nothing proves this point more than this guy. Gallatin. This guy is supposed to be an elf, but looks and talks like he's from a 90s or early 2000s TV show about bikers, or vampires, or both.
Let me know if you plan to start holding weapons back next, leaving unarmed squirrels to fight for our freedom, while the rest of us are out there, following orders, attacking convoys.
Why does he talk like that?
I don't get it. If he's a wise man, as you say, why the hell's he wasting God's given talent like yours?
Why the hell is he wasting God's given talent like yours? Seriously, why does he talk like that? He's quiet shouting. Did they want him to sound cool or something? Because he does not sound cool.
Eat. Here. Need you back out there. Here. Eat.
Here, have some bread. Here, eat, eat, yes, eat, eat, yes, eat, eat. Eat.
He sounds like he's trying to tell you a secret in a loud venue.
I like to eat my own boogers, especially when someone else is watching. I'm Gallatin, yes.
It's just ridiculous. This show looks cheap, but is expensive as all hell. It's cast incredibly strangely, but sometimes fine, it works. But what it certainly doesn't understand is how to set the right tone. 4. Mind your tone with me. Tone is a profoundly important aspect of any piece of media. When something strikes the right tone, it can bring you along for any sort of journey really, because it just feels right. If a series is weird enough, it stops feeling weird and starts feeling intriguing or even fun. When a show is funny enough, all sorts of things can make you laugh, and you can find yourself laughing at the worst possible events ever because they were just delivered in the best way possible.
How is she not getting this? She's stonewalling us. It is a classic snail technique.
Classic.
Yet when something's tone is inconsistent, it leads to that very something feeling wrong, and there's not very much that can be done to save it from that unenjoyable feeling from then on. Now, I'm not declaring that this would make for a bad show per se, but imagine if Breaking Bad stopped being a crime drama halfway through and suddenly turned into a light-hearted romance between Walter White and Hank Schrader. Brooklyn Nine-Nine wouldn't be the same show if it suddenly adopted the tone of The Wire or SVU every now and then between quippy, family-friendly jokes. Tonally, The Witcher is a jumble of contradictions, from the strangely modern use of language
At least conjure me up some decent food before we get to Shitguard.
to how they portray this sassy troupe of performers and the music they play.
Urgent upon that mix, power of hijinks that did perplex me.
And even the anachronistic way people seem to party and dance or even talk at times. Nothing feels consistent. This show goes from this semi-serious epic fantasy tale to doing goofy things like this.
What in the name of...
For kingdom and glory!
Or the use of this shot that looks like they ripped it right out of the Evil Dead movies. Things like these happen often between serious plot points or the emergence of heavy themes, so I can't help but feel confused as to what the goal of all these tonal shifts were.
Do you know whose skulls these are?
Dead people?
Drastic tonal shifts can result in a fantastic and sometimes novel feeling experience, but those shifts have to be measured and executed masterfully. But as anyone who has watched a Marvel property lately can tell you, there's a point where jokes just take away from your enjoyment rather than add to it, especially when they're not funny, and certainly when they don't fit the context or genre of the text overall. And when they shove so many jokes in when they're unnecessary, it gets to the point where you wonder whether the people behind the property care about it or not.
Night never wasted a kill.
Dear. I'm afraid.
take my leave.
Oh my god, guys, that's so funny. He's farting. No way. Oh my god, he's running off into the woods holding his butt. You know what he might need to do? He might need to go make boom boom on a leaf.
I went boom boom on a leaf. Boom boom!
You just kissed a boom boom, baby. So don't expect any more sugar from me, sweetheart, until we wash your dirty, dirty face.
It's as if this show can't take itself seriously, which is strange because at one point, the creators supposedly wanted to fill the mature TV fantasy void that Game of Thrones left behind after it wrapped. With such a strange tone for this kind of show, I don't think such high aspirations were met by the creators' efforts. Yet it was from the very start of this show that I knew that The Witcher was going to be a tonal mess. The first episode partly takes place in a small town named Blaviken, where we are introduced to this girl, Morelka. She's someone who is over the provincial life and wants adventure.
I want more. I have to be more because I don't know what to do in Blaviken for the rest of my life except go to the boring old market.
From the moment we meet her, she's all plucky and surprisingly unsqueamish about the monster Geralt has just killed, and says things like, "I can be a witcher too, can't I?" Wait, no, that's little Johnny from the game.
Defecating to the sunrise, downright glorious.
This is the sort of thing she says.
You don't scare me.
That's too bad.
And I can also tell you, Kikimores are useful. Population control. I sold him our dog when it died. Mysteriously. I have to be more because I don't know what to do in Blaviken for the rest of my life except go to the boring old market.
And kill rats.
And dogs.
She just straight up admits to killing her dog, and I am profoundly confused as to what the writers were going for here. I mean, it's not delivered in a way that makes us question her character. In fact, the tone of this whole interaction is just jovial in an attempt at being charming.
I killed a rat this morning with my breakfast fork. Stabbed it in its fat little gut. You should speak to Master Irion, our wizard. I sold him our dog when it died. Mysteriously. I got 15 crowns for the yappy mat.
This makes her a psychopath, not someone we would care about when she eventually gets taken hostage at the end of the episode. To make matters worse, after she gets saved by the Witcher, she just coldly tells him to get lost as people are stoning him for putting her in danger when he clearly saved her life.
Get out of Blaviken, Geralt. Don't ever come back.
Her behavior kind of makes you wanna toss a coin to your Witcher to get rid of the real monster in Blaviken, if you get me. And on that topic,
Toss a coin to your Witcher.
Is an awful, terrible song. Even the guy who sings it thinks so.
Did you know that your song, Toss a Coin to Your Witcher, has also been in the UK Top 100 charts on 4 separate occasions?
Toss a coin to the Witcher. You don't like the song?
I didn't hear that.
I have no idea how that song got so famous at the time, but one thing for certain is that the music in this show is both awful and okay at any given time. In general, it pales in comparison to the music from the games, but the series makes an okay attempt at the score for the most part, I guess. Yet even when I say that, songs like this burst forth from time to time.
Need old man the hag to stir up a potion so that your lady might get an abortion.
Which just doesn't fit the setting at all. Jaskier does have some decent songs to his name, but as I said, I don't even think the show feels that way, as it undermines him at every turn. It's this insane mix of creative decisions that I just can't get behind. It perhaps would have been fine if the tone broke during points when they tried to achieve a laugh or break tension, especially if those times were few and far between, but The Witcher fails to even build that tension in the first place because its tone is so thoroughly inconsistent.
Geralt? Yennefer told me to... You're busy. You're busy. Yeah.
In this scene, the spy master Dijkstra was just revealed to have deviously killed the queen of a kingdom named Redania to further his own interests. This could have made for an incredibly tense, shocking scene, yet they chose to deliver it absence any suspense or tension whatsoever. First, we get a pantomime performance from King Vizimir when he finds his wife's head in a box.
Oh. Present. They're not so bad.
Held in a box.
yeah, this acting is really convincing. Then, the guy who's a spy master, remember, doesn't bother hiding the fact that he's the one responsible for the killing in front of the king's brother. This is all done because the writers couldn't allot enough time to set up these characters and their dynamics properly, so they had to cut corners and make everything silly, or unserious, or rushed, which ended up hurting the efficacy of moments like these throughout the show. Look at him, he just whimsically shrugs and gets on with eating the king's food, which is sinister, yes, but is not as powerful of a scene as it should have been. His flippancy could have worked in principle, but it doesn't here because we don't understand these characters just yet, and we never get to feel the weight of what he has just done. The queen whose head was in that box had about 10 seconds of total screen time in this show before this, by the way. So, you know, we don't get to feel anything from this revelation.
What would you suggest?
We needed further developed, convincing, ominous performances, and a tighter, more claustrophobic scene in a setting that felt a lot more serious and just darker in general. Yet what we get delivered is bland, silly, and lacking any importance whatsoever. And that sadly can get mapped out to the rest of the show, which is just a tragedy, but nowhere near as tragic as the decision to refer to a secondary villain of the show as this.
This fire was after him, a mage, I don't know who he was. Nice scar, shithead.
Fire.
Unfortunately, yes.
I'm censoring it because of YouTube, but just so we're clear, they're using a no-no word that alliterates with fire and would autocorrect on your phone to ducker. Charming. In fact, the use of profanity could best be described as childish in this show. One of the worst culprits of this immature choice of language is Yennefer, but we'll get to her much later, because everyone is guilty of this. Scenes are robbed of their weight by writers whom I can only assume had a collective superior smirk on their faces as they wrote stuff like this in.
Did your mother a snowman?
I imagine it was all an attempt to prove
a counterintuitive undercutting of convention and expectations.
What, so Shitguard is good writing?
No, you just don't get it. It's actually smart and down to earth to write like this. It makes the characters both more relatable and iconic in their own irreverent sort of fashion. You're just too stupid to get how smart the writing actually is, because it doesn't care if it sounds stupid, because it knows it's smart. Plus,
we sort of had to cater to the TikTok crowd.
Ugh, I'm getting angry at you questioning my style of writing. In fact, somebody hand me my crossbow for...
Quickfire 5, a lightning round of stupidity, contradictions, and inconsistencies.
I am beloved by all and have no enemies.
By the way, this whole thing has been incredibly hard to film because this little critter has been on my lap the entire time.
This mount's too big for a slot anyway.
Then why do you have it? I'm not gonna lie to you, this is the least intimidating gang of ne'er-do-wells I have ever seen. If I saw these guys in the street, I'd want to bully them.
So pick me. Choose me. Love me.
On the Netflix Witcher website timeline, it says Yen's transformation takes place in the year 1210. In this scene, right before that is about to happen, the Brotherhood of Sorcerers are deciding where to send Yennefer and discuss sending her to Sintra. They bring up the point that Calanthe may be a more malleable heiress than her ill father King Daggerad of Sintra proves to be. But that point then gets shut down as they say this.
I've heard rumors he's taken ill. Now, if the king dies, perhaps his heiress would be more pliable. Princess.
Calanthe? Good luck with that. Word is, she's even more stubborn than her father is.
However, in the timeline, it mentions Calanthe's birth year being 1216. How does she prove to be so before she's even born? I don't know why they don't have Yennefer make the same expression when she teleports to another place here. Like, they do this sort of transition at other times where a character seamlessly moves from one scene to another. Yet here, they have her making a completely different expression, even though it makes far more sense to do the seamless transition in this scene over any others. Look, not to get too nitpicky here, but how the do the Scoia'tael lose this fight to like 8 dwarves and 8 other humans that aren't even on the same side? How many people do they have for this super important operation? Like 4?
For God's
I've got her!
Why does the elven dummy prince do this? You've got her, so what? Take her away, stop declaring it so that everyone else that's trying to get her gets you. Well, there you go. Yen asks for a portal to be made for her after she gets her magic back. Why? So what if her portals can be tracked? It doesn't matter. She's going to the place where they're likely tracking them from. What is this monster even doing to Geralt over here? It's like patting him. This is so weird.
The Emperor only absolves you once you're dead.
Hey. We got another one!
All that wine just makes him heavier.
All that wine just makes them heavier? Are there 2 people in this bag? How else could she have snuck out of the prison if not? The fact that the guy can't tell the difference between one person who has drunk a lot of wine and 2 people that have drunk a lot of wine is just dumb. Fringilla survives this fall unscathed, by the way. Look, I'm not going to get into the whole monolith thing and tell you how it's a dumb addition to the story, but what I am going to do is call out how incredibly stupid and coincidental it is that the Witchers have a monster-related monolith set into the tree they have at the center of their keep.
What the fuck?
Like, these monoliths were placed exactly where the story needed them to be, just outside of Cintra, right inside Kaer Morhen. Who knows where the next one is going to be? This guy is clearly hitting nothing in this shot. Like, he's just too far away from this mega basilisk considering the size of his sword. But he sure is adept at swinging it around, I guess.
Kiki Moors are useful. Population control.
She says this with chilling acceptance. How does it make sense for this to be an actual policy of a town? Who would choose to live there? If people are okay with a monster eating people for population control, why do they get mad at Geralt for killing a few people who don't even live there in this town? If the internal logic of this show was consistent, surely that's a good thing that he killed a bunch of people, right? This is an accent of a coal miner from the Kingdom of Temeria.
We must force his hand, lay down our picks, and refuse to work.
Yet this is the accent of a nobleman named Ostrit from that very same region.
And you have my word that our king will not hear of this treason.
And then this is how their king speaks.
Because only a man devoid of all heart could accuse a brother of bedding his murdered sister while urging him to kill her.
They all sound like they're from the same place, don't they? The bad guy faction or evil empire in this series is named Nilfgaard.
What?
You serious?
Yeah, I know. Terribly, awfully great name. They are portrayed as so evil at times in this show that it's genuinely hilarious. Their armor in season 1 not only looks horrible, but is such a pathetic attempt at making them seem evil that it can't get any uglier. I have no idea how this got okayed by anyone with eyes.
Thief! No, Harry! Thief, give it back!
To add to the whole Nilfgaard being so deliciously evil thing, the mages of Nilfgaard don't believe that any form of magic should be forbidden, so they do some truly vile things. They're so evil to such a hilarious extent that things like this happen.
Calanthe's progeny is in Broccolon Forest.
Yeah, that's right. He just ate some flesh from a dead person, had a seizure, got gutted, and then she read his entrails to figure out where someone was. What? The bad guys never do this again to find out where someone is, by the way, which is obviously very smart. Now, I know I mentioned this as a positive change earlier, and it is, but the Dryads in Season 1 were just regular women with dreadlocks, and then in Season 3 they looked like this. Yarpen Zigrin is an interesting character who gives a uniquely hopeful insight into human-non-human relations in the books. He's a character that is a little rough around the edges, sure, but he has a lot of heart, too. The show just reduces him down to a shouty, sweary dwarf.
Get right! He said he wants 4 fucking pints!
We're going on an adventure.
And yeah, I don't think it's really unfair to say that they didn't do this guy any justice.
What do you want?
To get to the center of it all.
What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean?
Ciri's eyebrows grew darker between seasons 1 and 2, which is fine, they do look better, but these scenes are chronologically like 10 minutes apart. How did her eyebrows get darker in that time, huh?
I see no steel here.
Bro, she literally has a sword on her back, and so does she. Did you think the deadly women slowly surrounding you were not important to this situation?
Have you heard of them, Richard?
This acting is so bad it's funny. Oh, look at him. He's such a bad dude. Look at his pose. He's striking a pose right for the camera. Okay, a little bit of context for this one. These women we saw earlier travel around with and protect this man named Bork. He has asked Geralt and Jaskier to accompany him on an adventure. Jaskier is curious as to why these women accompany him, and they say this.
He is the most beautiful.
Because he is the most beautiful. Now, it's meant to be a rather strange and hard to understand statement, as he looks like a regular guy. Now yes, beauty is indeed in the eye of the beholder, but it's hard to see how these women who Dandelion so aptly describes here...
You have the most incredible neck. It's like a sexy goose.
find this guy to be the most beautiful. However, the revelation later in the story is that he is in fact a one-of-a-kind, gorgeous golden dragon. And this is how he looks in the show.
What's that?
No one even flinches as this dragon lets out a deafening roar in a tiny cave. Okay, this is a monster that can shapeshift called a Doppler. Monsters in the Witcher universe are hurt quite badly by silver. This monster is intelligent unlike many others, and though Dopplers are usually kind-natured,
you're different to other Dopplers. You're not good-natured or helpful, are you?
This one is evil and sassy.
We are very flattered. But who is this secret peeper, peeping all our secrets?
He is commissioned by an evil Nilfgaardian, who we will get to later, to hunt down Ciri. When he finds her and ultimately gets found out for being an imposter, he confesses to killing Ciri's guardian and taking his face.
We killed Mousak and took his disgusting form.
So what does she do to him? She presses the side of the blade she somehow managed to get a hold of onto the evil monster's neck to just sizzle him a little rather than kill him. Oh, also, this is how the scene plays out.
Kill him.
What?
Then I'll do it.
Wait, no.
The quality of this execution reminds me of one of the best chase sequences in television history. Why do they leave his sword and equipment right outside his prison cell? What sort of system is this? It's not even in a box. Geralt's Witcher Guild's leader Vesemir is autopsying a Witcher who succumbed to a nasty curse, and has been doing so for days after his student or adopted child has died. Geralt walks up and asks his father figure to let the dead Witcher have peace. And before you ask, no, they don't bury him, but feed him to wolves? Is that their version of peace?
Two seconds later.
This is the fastest response time you will ever see to anything in your life, ever. Before you even hear an alarm bell sound, the horses have covered this entire distance to these two characters before they could even get back to their horses. Whoever's running drills for these guards needs a massive raise. Thanos' snap snapped Ciri's parents. Nice. Geralt breaks this bad guy who has a great in-show nickname's hands, picks up his sword and then just runs away, but doesn't bother giving him a quick stabby to finish the job off. Bro, he was right there. What are you doing with your life? Why does he leave him alive? Oh, right, I forgot. How else could he make sure that this guy can continue causing him problems later in the season? Oh yeah, and the show is bad at choreographing things at times. Istred is only in one short story, and yet he's been in this show for 3 seasons too many. He's meant to fight Geralt for Yennefer, showing how destructive her love can be on anyone and that she's an ice queen in a way. But these two don't ever really fight for her, save for this fake fight scene that they do at the ball to cause a distraction. The sad thing is, his character comes from a really good short story that shows just how difficult and destructive loving Yennefer can be. It's a shame that they just didn't bother adapting it at all. Geralt tries to dissuade Renfri from fighting by showing that he's Italian. Geralt gets help from a witch to try and find a cure for a girl he has rescued from her apparent mind control.
It's a mind control enchantment. It's extremely powerful. Elements of chaos, druidic magic, even some ancient elven sorcery in this spell. It would take lifetimes to acquire all these tricks. Whoever this mage is, they have quite a variety of interests.
Oof, that sounds difficult to deal with. I wonder what they'll do to overcome such a troublesome and...
An extraction elixir.
Well done, Otte.
Oh, cool. How fortunate it is that you can undo years upon years of alchemical learning and magical talent with whatever you can find in the pantry.
I remember my hunger, and her stomach growling twice as loud as mine. She used her magic to create elaborate meals that we couldn't afford.
He was hungry even when she used her magic to conjure elaborate meals they couldn't afford. Okay, wait, why were you hungry then? Was the food she conjured up an illusion? That's just cruel. Ugh. This is a great one. Geralt asks what a melange is.
What's the melange?
It's a dance.
And then proceeds to demonstrate that he knows exactly what a melange is 2 seconds later. Look at him go, it's almost as if he took melange classes. This dude is tearing up the dance floor. Kira Metz says she can't drink at the ball because she...
I plan on getting pregnant tonight. Exciting times ahead.
She could just be joking, but I prefer to think that the writers forgot about their own rules for this show. Cause yeah, as we'll get to later, sorceresses can't have babies. Jaskier doesn't age at all during the non-linear storyline that spans decades.
Geralt! Hello. What's it been? Months? Years? What is time anyway?
They shoot this elf called Dara for trespassing where no one is allowed to be, but then take care of him in the next scene. But speaking of trespassing, they just let this dude walk in and retrieve Ciri, who they think may be vital to their future. The Doppler says this.
Everything you've ever done, ever debated, ever dreamed is in our head now.
But turns out he doesn't take in all memories.
Except you have arthritis. You hate the cold.
As he forgets that he's supposed to have arthritis because he's bored or frustrated with being nice for more than a few minutes or something. As I mentioned earlier, this show is really poorly choreographed at times. Characters just stand right in the middle of chaotic scenes all the time in this show, and it feels so unnatural. The directors had no idea how to make certain sequences look organic, so they instead just defer to giving main characters this weird, convenient invulnerability. Having them do anything in these scenes except talk to each other would have just been too hard to figure out, I guess. But never mind. Look at how demented the fighters are around them. This guy is even moving in the wrong direction, the idiot. Nilfgaard's enemies are on the other side, buddy. Another example of this is the moment where a possessed Ciri just stands there and lets these witchers walk up to either side of her and cast a holding sign or spell named Irden without moving. Then there's the moment I will get into later where Yennefer sets a prisoner free as people just gasp and watch her do it. Even if magic wasn't allowed at the event, then people could have at least thrown something at her or chased her, but no chance. That would have just made things too hard to choreograph. Also, there's all these moments in the fight that takes place at the end of season 3 where people just stand there between all this crossfire of spells and arrows without any cover, and they're just fine. These priority targets are literally in the middle of a huge melee. They shouldn't be safe to just pep talk each other right here.
You've got to fight. You've got to fight.
There's no magically blocking anything in this fight either, as many of the non-magic users have these specially tipped arrows that negate magic.
Demerching tipped arrows.
The archers are the priority! Disarm and deflect!
Disarm and deflect? How are you going to deflect them if you just watched an arrow go through your own deflection shield, Tisea? None of these mages have even heard of an AoE spell, by the way. Oh wait, they have! They just don't use them in this fight for whatever reason. The most egregious example of all this is when the elven leader, Francesca, just stands in the center of this fight doing nothing for like a whole minute, and when spells and arrows are flying around, that's a fair bit of time. But then, the Hadouken happens. You see, regular balls of force just hit people and they fall over. Tissaya's ball of force? Well... What's hilarious is, straight after this, Tissaya just buckles over as if this one spell she has cast in this whole fight was too much for her. They had no idea what to do with her character after she did this, because if she were coherent, she would have killed Francesca right after she killed her hubby. But no, instead, they just have her slump down in weakness. It's pathetic. To add to the whole messy choreography thing, these two people joined their swords against one of the series' main antagonists, Cahir, and the people who made this show actually thought that this was a good idea and looked cool. Look at how goofy and impractical this looks. This isn't an upgrade, it isn't even a side grade, it's demented. And during this big fight, Gerhardt, the oldest living wizard in the wizarding world, is having a Gerhardt attack.
Gerhardt! He's having a heart attack! Take him!
Hold on, Gerhardt.
Put him in.
Easy. Gerhardt, no.
I can't believe they actually put this into the show, but let me explain. An evil sorcerer kidnapped women and made a weird meat monster by mixing their bodies for God knows what reason.
Their bodies melted into a mound of flesh and veins and blood.
It will take all of us to reverse this spell. Together. They deserve that.
The sorceresses see this and decide it would be the right thing to do to undo this spell. They undo the spell, but just leave the bodies and walk out, and then decide to go back and give them a proper burial.
We can't just leave them there. They deserve a proper burial.
Like, this can't be anything other than padding for the show, right?
Now you're going to remember them.
Oh, right. They needed to make a big deal out of the funeral at Aretusa so that they could distract all the mages to allow this to happen. And look, not to be too insensitive here or anything, but doing what Tissaia does right here to end up like this doesn't instantly kill you. It didn't kill Yennefer instantly when she did it in the first season, so why does that happen here? Anyway, I at least think the whole your pain is my pain thing and how they mirrored Yennefer's entry to Aretusa with Tissaia's exit was smart. But I don't agree with everything they did here by a long shot.
You made a choice. And you'll never know if it was the right one.
Why does Stregobor say this to the Witcher? It literally goes against his interests to talk to the Witcher like this. Oh, right. He's reinforcing the thematic undertones of his decision right here to us. Never mind. And finally, for this quick fire round, the Jaskier and Radovid romance. They had no idea what to do with Dandelion's character by season 3, so they forced, and I mean violently shoved, a romance between Jaskier and old gross-hair Magoo Prince Radovid down our throats. It lacks almost all of the necessary building blocks of an on-screen romance that one could think of, but hey, at least they don't rely on a cheap trope to try and force their connection, right?
You see people for what they are, not what they pretend to be.
Oh, you understand that the bard whose very job it is to have a deep perspective on people and events has empathy, do you?
I'm an artist, Yennefer. It's my job to put myself in other people's shoes.
He sees people for who they truly are, huh?
You see people.
Wow. There you have it. What a unique romantic insight. I'm in love. As you would suspect, they don't spend enough time together for this sort of observation to have any effect on Jaskier or anyone really.
How does he know what I see? I mean, he's only met me like twice.
He acts no differently around the prince than he does anyone else, and he's given no reason to feel anything for the prince either, save for that gorgeous hair, of course. But seriously, there was no reason for these two to fall in love so quickly.
What does Radovid even mean, I see people?
You like him.
But never have I ever seen you have a crush.
Radovid is a spoon.
This show is in such a rush to tick boxes that they just go, okay, these two are in love now, thanks, bye, which, as we all know, is just a dumb thing to do. What's worse is that they actually tried to play Radovid's betrayal as a painful moment.
How can you think my feelings for you are alive?
Because that is who you are, Radovid, at your core.
I'm so sorry.
Radovid is a spoon.
Ugh, these writers are just so ham-fisted, it's infuriating. 6. Nuance Intolerance. This show is horrendously allergic to nuance. And I mean the have your EpiPens perpetually at the ready, this thing can't even be on the same flight with anyone who read even the first Harry Potter book the night before sort of allergy to nuance. And why is this the case? Well, I'm convinced it's because the writers have had slabs of ham grafted onto their fists, forcing them to be as overt as possible when trying to make any sort of point in this show. Nothing whatsoever can exist from the source material with the slightest bit of subtlety or the original vision it was intended to have, because that would require a small portion of the audience's brain to function as they watch this show, and that's just a horrible thing to ask of anyone. Everything is just sledgehammered in a million times to make sure you get the point. And if you don't believe me, just look at the amount of times they use the word destiny in this show.
Destiny.
Destiny. Destiny. Destiny.
Destiny.
Destiny. Destiny.
Destiny.
Destiny. Destiny. Destiny.
Destiny.
Destiny.
Destiny.
Destiny. Destiny. Destiny. Destiny. Destiny.
Destiny.
Destiny. Destiny. Destiny. Destiny. Destiny.
Destiny. Destiny. Destiny. Destiny.
Destiny. Destiny.
Destiny.
Destiny.
Destiny.
Destiny.
Destiny. Destiny. Destiny.
Destiny.
Destiny. Destiny. Destiny.
Destiny.
Destiny.
Destiny.
Destiny.
Destiny.
Destiny. Destiny. Destiny. Destiny. Destiny.
Destiny.
Destiny.
Destiny.
Destiny.
Destiny.
Destiny has spoken.
Destiny can go.
Our exhibit.
That was probably not all of them, by the way. I just couldn't be bothered to pick them all out, but I hope that was enough for you to get the picture, because that took me some time. They rope everyone in they can to say this damned word, when really, the idea that Geralt and Ciri are linked by fate just needed to be alluded towards like 2 or 3 times and the audience would have gotten the picture. But then again, if they only mentioned destiny like 4 times in the first season instead of the 40 times that they do, then there wouldn't be so much of a big deal made about all the time the 2 characters who are supposedly destined for one another spent together, which is about like 14 seconds of the last episode.
People linked by destiny will always find each other.
Who is Yennefer?
What the fuck? These two don't know each other. Why do they run towards each other and hug? I can guess why. Because you see, my guess is that the writers drilled in their own idea that these two were mega destined for each other into their own heads. They did so to such a degree that they ended up hyping up the non-existent connection between Geralt and Ciri too much to themselves, and just forgot to give the audience any reason for them to feel the same way. They overstate the importance of destiny as a concept so much in this show, which belies a fundamental misunderstanding of the intentions behind the books first of all, but also doesn't correlate much with what they actually wrote into the show themselves. These two don't meet multiple times like they do in the books as if destiny was at play. Geralt is just some rando that her grandma told her to look for the last time she saw her, nothing more, but the writers didn't seem to understand what they wrote in themselves. They cut out all of Geralt and Ciri's intended meetings that were meant to happen before this moment to elevate this moment's impact, but ended up undermining it in the process. In my opinion, I see destiny as more of a perspective than a law of nature in this universe. So, if the events of people's lives are intertwined time and again, then that can be seen as destiny. But it's actually not that important. A large overarching concept in the books was that characters routinely undermined and did not believe in the fantasy tropes of prophecies, fate, and destiny, and kinda mocked them from time to time. The show, though, completely misunderstood what the books were trying to say, even though it sometimes was quite plainly written into the text. The Witcher is a story about agency rather than being thrown about by destiny. Geralt looks after and cares for Ciri because he loves her, not because he is drawn to her by some external force of the universe magnetically pulling him around against his will. I mean, you could argue that the love he feels for Ciri is a consequence of destiny, but if you're that sort of person, just shut up or Good and evil are choices. Taking the path of an evil or a lesser evil is a choice, and choices have consequences. Even the decision to not do anything at all has its own form of significance. The sum of all these consequences, especially when they interconnect and all the causes and effects weave into and around one another, can be called destiny. Or just plain life. Destiny is meant to be an ambiguous concept that you are sort of meant to question at first, then wholly accept, and then question once again. It was not meant to be something that you bludgeon the audience over the head with and point to multiple times. I mean, look at the posters for the show. Destined to protect. Destined to survive. I can't deal with how overt these people can be. The many prophecies of this universe are intentions that are helped along by people making choices through the passage of time in order to facilitate the fruition of those prophecies, which would make you think, what is the point of a prophecy at all in that case, save for something that actively pushes people's purposes towards those intentions? Characters aren't so much destined for each other, rather they simply fit together as a matter of circumstance, and people can interpret that how they will, for what is circumstance but destiny?
I deserve my destiny.
Geralt and Yennefer get together and split up innumerable times through the many, many years they've known each other. Yet is the reason they keep getting back together Geralt's last wish? Is it destiny? Or is it simply the fact that they just love each other and are good for each other when frictions don't arise? Their relationship did not last all those times because it simply needed a little something more. It needed a purpose to adhere their rather wayward and wanderlusty characters together in order to finally commit and stay together and feel like they belong to one another. The adopted daughter that cements their bond as family is Ciri.
A child of destiny.
No. The books end with many prophecies unfulfilled and fates upended. Now, major spoilers for the books here, but Geralt actually dies at the end of the Witcher saga at the hands of an adolescent nobody. This kid, fueled by his and his town's collective mob-like hatred for non-humans, gets a lucky strike in on the saga's hero with a pitchfork, and that's that. Geralt gets killed for doing the right thing, for standing up to the ignorance and violence of a pogrom, and his great love Yennefer dies at his side as she gives up her life force in an attempt to bring him back from the dead. Ciri is not the seed that will burst forth into flame and usher in a new era for the elves, but instead just skedaddles off to another reality where she can be free, perhaps taking up the mantle of the Witcher for herself. Now, look, maybe she takes her dead adopted parents to an evergreen land of beauty where they get their happily ever after, but that's likely the poetic license on behalf of the narrator that's telling us this ultimately sad tale.
Am I boring you? Don't set this tale aside. Give me just a few minutes more, for someone special's about to appear in dire straits upon a scaffold.
And fine, you wouldn't be wrong in saying these guys were all destined to be together, but you wouldn't exactly be right in saying that they followed the path that destiny had set out before them either. But the show has the complete opposite view of this. Geralt is destined to protect Ciri. Why? Because he failed to protect one princess from harm, and therefore he must spend the rest of his days saving other princesses from harm.
I used to be a princess.
This isn't my first time trying to save a princess who others see as a monster.
What happened to that princess?
I killed her.
Yennefer is destined to survive, whatever the hell that means, especially in regards to what her actual fate is, and Ciri is destined to fight. Cool, I guess.
But the bond that will come into being between you and this child, when it is born, will be extraordinary.
The girl in the woods will be with you always. She is your destiny.
People linked by destiny will always find each other.
Oh, we know that these guys belong together now because the writers keep saying so. Now I get it! What's gross is that in the next episode, which takes place soon after this scene, Geralt gets asked by Ciri if she is his destiny, and Geralt proclaims that she is much more than that.
I'm your destiny. Whatever that means.
You're much more than that, Cirilla.
Look, that's lovely and all, but how the hell does he know unless he's just being nice? He doesn't know her. He doesn't know that she has magical powers at this point either. These two are strangers to one another, yet he feels so strongly for her. It's plain dumb how they handle the themes in this show, but that's not all they do to this amateur level. They also resort to cliché trope after cliché trope to ensure that this show feels as uninventive as possible. For instance, they do that thing where characters go, hold, hold, like Braveheart, not once, but twice.
Hold your fire until they're in range. Hold. Hold.
There's a scene where a character called Mousesack. I know, that name is just awful. This is one of those rare moments where changing the source material wouldn't have been such a bad idea. But anyway, Mousesack has been caught by the evil Nilfgaardians, and they're about to feed him to a monster that is able to take his shape and pretend to be him. Before they do this though, they tell him to run.
Run.
This is evil and all, but he only gets to run for about 4.5 meters before he gets caught. Seriously, he runs for an in-show time of like 6.5 seconds before he's caught, and that's it. They don't even give this scene enough room for a thrilling chase or a will he or won't he escape moment where the monster is sniffing him out behind a bush or something. They just tell him to run because that's what the bad guys do in shows like this. Yet the execution of this show is so flawed that they don't even get the cliche right. In the episode about the Wizard's Conclave, they play this song that I presume is called All Is Not As It Seems, because they say it like 1,000 times.
All is not as it seems. All is not as it seems. All is not as it seems.
Anyway, they use this song so many times in the episode, hinting that what you're watching may not be all that it seems. Subtle, huh? Even Vilgefortz says trust in what you see to mislead the audience. This episode did have a cute idea behind it to show us misleading, differing perspectives on the same event, but its execution is shoddy to say the least. They repeat a lot of what we've seen in the episode in no meaningfully different ways, and the reveals of what is different are underwhelming at best. But let's at least give credit where it's due. This ball is put together way more successfully than its CW counterpart from season 1. Ugh, look at the LED lights on the floor. Awful. To hammer this point about nuance, or lack thereof, home, let's talk about the one episode that concerns the Witcher contract that I mentioned earlier. This guy is meant to be a charismatic and handsome king, but instead we get to meet him doing his best Denethor impression, grossly scarfing down chicken the moment we meet him. This dude, named Ostrit, was sad the king was pumping his sister, because he wanted that royal pum-pum all for himself. So get this, he intentionally curses the king, which inadvertently kills his sister and leads to their daughter becoming a monster. In the books, yes, just like many other things in this series, the books did do it better. Ostrit curses the princess kind of by accident. At the thought that the woman he desires so strongly has fallen for her brother instead, he just mutters a wish out loud in a moment of anger and love-struck frustration, and boom, it happens. Oops. Now, this is subjective and it is my opinion, but it's a fact that that chaotic ambiguity around his unintentional curse is way more intriguing than this.
She was hiding from the Brotherhood. She sold me a lamb. And then I recited some silly chant. And then I bathed in the lamb's blood until sunrise. And that is all.
It's just plain obvious that the writers were incapable of letting something be complicated without fiddling with it. They had to reduce everything down to its lesser parts so that you could grasp what was going on whilst scrolling your phone. The showrunner of the series, Lauren S. Hisrick, says that she knows that modern audiences are smart. Her and her team, though, willingly dumbed down critical facets of what make The Witcher's world complex, mysterious, or even intriguing. She also stated that adapting a show necessitates some kind of changes to the source material, which is fine, but they kind of went a little overboard with all the simplifying they did. They also went a little crazy with the changes to the Witcher property in its entirety, and it's clear to see why. The writers did not like the source material they were making a whole ass show about, and it was pretty evident from episode 1 that they did not hold any reverence for the books. And I mean, they really kicked the crap out of those books. They took those books behind the shed and shot them, and then they ate them, and then they pooped out what they ate, and then they cooked that poop, and then they shot it once more for good measure and served up that bullet-written turd for us to eat. Most, if not all, of the characters are butchered and stripped of their intricacy, and at times their dignity as well. The plot is weirdly simplified yet still somehow confusing to follow, and nothing is given time to breathe or develop, and yet what hurts the most is all of this was intentional. Now, I'm paraphrasing here, but a producer stated that the target audience for this show were people who had wet socks for brains that were hopefully sent further into neural degradation by TikTok. I'm pretty sure that was a good faith interpretation of what he had to say, but even if it wasn't, at times it genuinely feels like that's how the writers felt about their audience. I mentioned earlier that Netflix aimed for this show to be the next Game of Thrones, but the choice to simplify the plot of the books doesn't exactly make sense with aspirations that high. Regardless of how you feel about Game of Thrones at the end of the day, it's pretty undeniable that it was a series that had a lot of moving parts and managed to portray many of its characters in deep and sophisticated ways. So for the Witcher adaptation to be purposefully dumbed down doesn't exactly... Wait. Hold on. I guess if the showrunners for The Witcher were aiming to achieve the quality of that last terrible season of Game of Thrones, then they didn't even achieve that either. This simply is a show with very little thought put into it. We get all of the staples of bad and lazy world building, from inconsistent or illogical portrayals of regional politics to what amounts to video game-like fast travel for some characters, without the use of portals, by the way. This show has it all. In the first season, we even get unclear, non-linear storytelling for absolutely no reason at all, save for confusing those who haven't read the books and won't be able to tell what's going on until the end of the season. Fine, yeah, the audience could catch on to the tiny, meaningless clues that they drop from time to time in this show, but who is really looking out for Kid Foltest, or the name dropping of the Battle of Hotspurs, whatever that even is? I get that the non-linearity was a unique way of telling the story, and I get that the short stories are not told in chronological order either. Yet that is fine in regards to the short stories because they are indeed short and are closed loops. They give us details and fill in the gaps we have about the Witcher universe in fragmented parts intentionally. And I say intentionally as the underlying themes and the overarching plots that are conveyed through those short stories follow along quite sequentially, so telling a story in this unconventional manner feels way more efficient in fleshing out this world. If they faithfully adapted the short stories in their intended order, the show would undoubtedly have been better. However, it suffers from such a messy execution due to the demented fact that they mix the various dumbed-down plots of the original non-linear short stories with the mostly linearly told Witcher saga, so we get this clash of pacing, themes, and disconnected points in the narrative that leads to an annoying, unfulfilling result. But that's not all. To add to the confusion, the writers also sprinkled in their own poorly thought-out elements to that volatile mix, which is just about as bad a decision as it sounds. We are thus subjected to characters having insane levels of plot armor, or moments where a character has to undo something they clearly would not have done in the first place just to negate contradictions to the plot the writers wrote in themselves. The messiness doesn't stop there though, because we still have to address the series' primary antagonist, Nilfgaard. Look again at the armor design for these guys in Season 1. You know that design was a bad decision because you never get to see it again. But the problem with Nilfgaard is not just one of mere aesthetics. You see, throughout the show, they speak about Emir, the White Flame, the Emperor of Nilfgaard himself, as if he's this incredible leader that commands respect. Whenever you hear about him, people say things like, "Oh, the White Flame, he raised me from the gutter and liberated me with light. He is the very reason I live and breathe, and I shall give my life to enact his every whim." But then those same people that love him so much and do horrible, unspeakable things in his name end up betraying him anyway.
Everything I do is in service of the White Flame.
And what do you think I'm doing? You kill me, the White Flame will hold no mercy hunting you down.
Fringilla and I serve Emir because he served us first.
I witnessed the White Flame call on you, mold you, anoint you. We would do anything for the White Flame. Emir is brutal. He's a liar. He deserves to suffer.
Oh, and when we finally get to meet him, he's just your regular old run-of-the-mill silent dweeb that demands an evil thing be done, kinda just because.
Our swords were dull as spoons from the bloody skirmishes.
I mean, look at how pompous they make him act here. It's as if they're trying to make you hate him instead of respect him.
My man says you're from the Scoia'tael front. What news do you bring, son? I know a good leader when I see one. Prove it.
Kill your friend who would be super useful to my own cause. Yeah, maybe there are reasons against keeping him alive, but don't pretend like the show has thought those things through deeply.
Gallatin is a good fighter. He knows the land and the elves are loyal to him. He can deliver us the north.
There's almost no deeper meaning to what this guy wants other than he's just following what it says on the first page of the evil villain handbook. He just commands a cruel conquest and people love him for it.
You want to help the elves by joining a kingdom that regularly massacres whole villages.
All hail the White Flame.
You think that we ventured north to conquer? We came to liberate.
Nilfgaard takes no prisoners. Which means that right now, my citizens are being tortured. Their legs lit on fire. Their tongues fed to the dog.
In Nilfgaard, we've strengthened trade. We've funded research.
Oh, he allowed research and strengthened trade? Okay, I want to marry him now. He has my undying faith and love.
One day, war will be a thing of the past. It will be a distant memory. And the races of our world, they will live in peace.
Their insides are being pulled to their outsides while they walk.
He's going to end all war by one big war that won't end until all war ends? Nice! We never get to see him lead through action and inspire his people in any fashion. He just has this fanatical loyalty from everyone because he killed the previously cruel dictator, as if that's a good thing. We're somehow meant to buy that he's an upgrade in any way because people spit when they hear his predecessor's moniker, the Usurper.
The Usurper.
The writer slightly exaggerated this strange, almost religious fanaticism people have for the Emperor of Nilfgaard, yet that slight exaggeration amplified its effects so much that the faith people have in him becomes unbelievable without any compelling evidence for why people feel that way.
Fringilla and I serve Emir because he served us first.
What do you mean? What do you...
They certainly don't try to give the audience any points to make as a case for his rule, and instead just make him a bad guy because he's the man who commands the soldiers who wear black. Could they have shown that within the Empire things were in fact nice, yet the imperialism was what made the Empire bad? Nah, and don't tell me the scene where Istred says this.
Well, these people were starving before Nilfgaard. They look out for their people. Everybody gets something.
Or the scene in the tavern in some occupied territory where people sing a song in the Emperor's name does that either, because it doesn't. People love Emir because people have to love Emir for this show. That's all the justification we can get. Yet when comparing the Emperor of Nilfgaard to the kings of the Northern Realms, it's genuinely hard to come up with any reasons for why they should be in charge of anything either, because for the most part, they genuinely suck.
Do you know, I've known him since I was 12.
Foltest was majorly downgraded to a silent, selfish sister pumper, and whoever this guy is, well, let's not forget that he chooses to kill his wife by hiring Freakazoid Magoo and his pet Mantis, all because she gave birth to one too many girls. Worst of all is this guy, King Vizimir. He acts like they ripped him right out of the show Blackadder.
Yeah, I bet you can't wait to get back and get that bat in your hand and give those balls a good walloping, eh?
Blaming us for murdering that stupid elven baby. That definitely wasn't us.
Look, I'm gonna be honest with you, I have no idea what they are going for with this character, because he's got such an annoying screen presence. He just isn't funny, and none of his scenes fit the overall tone of the show at all, and honestly make it way less enjoyable to watch.
Argue you an arrow in the bum. Now, I yell go, he scuttles off like a wounded deer, and then I shot the elf like this. Hold still, I say.
He just sucks and is annoying and unfunny, and yet he is just about as useful as the other kings in this series. Their worthlessness is best evidenced by the fact that they all run an operation that allows 2 prisoners to escape right from under their noses. Yeah, that's right, our very own Yennefer and a Nilfgaardian commander-general named Cahir get away from an execution on foot, solely by means of toppling over what are ostensibly a few big lamps. Were there no guards posted here, guys? How did they think that this was an acceptable depiction of an escape? No one chases them? But no, don't you dare use your brain, stop it, stop! This show genuinely treats its audience like idiots at times because it says things out loud that do not need to be said out loud. Look, I'm not exactly a fan of the saying show don't tell, as I really do believe that telling something well is an essential means of showing a thing effectively. But my word, does this show make me rethink that opinion.
Traitors to the Brotherhood, you'll get what you deserve.
Yeah, no duh, that's Geralt's sword. You're meant to be hiding from these guys, just be quiet.
You talk. You are intelligent. I'll give you that. So I won't kill you.
Well, not necessarily, Geralt, my boy. She talked just fine and you had no problems backward skewering her. But I'm glad you both are saying all this out loud like that, because I definitely understand what's going on now. And yeah, the middle of a fight seems like a completely organic time to have a conversation like this.
Did your mother f*** a snowman?
Well, scrap that. Another example of this is in the episode titled Bottled Appetites. Geralt gets bumped into randomly by Dandelion, who says this.
Geralt. Hello. What's it been? Months? Years? What is time anyway?
Very meta dialogue, I know, but guess what Geralt is doing here? He is intentionally looking for a djinn in the river.
That makes sense, in so much that it sort of doesn't.
What? Didn't you know that the best way to get your hands on a genie, other than proving you're a diamond in the rough of course, is by fishing for a pot in a random river in Rinda? No? Yeah, I'm with you. That does sound kind of stupid. Why not seek this genie out at any other time if you knew where it was? Could a mutant monster slayer who doesn't have money for new clothes sometimes, that's hated by people all over, not have any other reason to use a genie other than the fact that he's run out of sleeping potions? No, you sweet fool. Don't think about it. Don't use your brain. Shh. The fact that they changed the plot to have Geralt intentionally looking for a genie to grant him sleep rather than have him fish it out of the water by accident perfectly encapsulates how the writers didn't understand the books at all. Ironically, it's more likely that you could randomly find a djinn than just arbitrarily know the location of this wish-granting creature, but hey, in the story, Geralt mistakenly believes Dandelion is owed the djinn's 3 wishes after they wrestle for it, but it later becomes evident that it is in fact Geralt who the genie is bound to as this happens.
I want you to burst, you son of a...
He declared a wish, and it happened. Simple enough for the audience to understand, right? Of course not.
You're the one with the wishes.
They had to have this other character say, "You're the one with the wishes" out loud, just for all the wet sock for brains people out there to get the picture. Now, would it be so bad if the audience were allowed to figure out things for themselves? Well, you know the answer to that question. But for any Netflix Witcher fans out there, it would not be so bad. In the very first episode of this show, things are as usual spelled out quite plainly for us, yet still remain confusing. A mage named Stregobor asks Geralt to kill a woman named Renfri, as she's just as monstrous as any of the other beasts he's accustomed to killing, supposedly. The mage hates Renfri because she's been after him for a long while and has led him to being secluded in his impenetrable tower for some unknown length of time. Renfri is after Stregobor because he tried to have those born under similar circumstances as her killed, but failed with her as she's immune to magic and can be quite wily. So the mage's numerous attempts on Renfri's life failed, despite being in cahoots with her mother, who likely had insecurities about no longer being the fairest of them all. So, trouble cometh. Renfri is a rather ambiguously portrayed character in the short story titled The Lesser Evil that the episode with the same name is based on. She is a woman that almost seethes with a vengeful aura, but her sympathetic Snow White or Rose Red but messed up past is what gives the audience and indeed Geralt some pause when figuring out how to feel about her. That and the fact that she's a
beautiful one.
Yet after a lovely night together, Geralt grunts the market and gets up to go and kill this woman and her crew, as they plan on doing something particularly naughty on the upcoming market day. But what that bad thing is, nobody knows, because they cut all the relevant information out in order to make room for a whole other plot they shoved into the same episode. You see, what Renfri and her crew are planning on doing is to kill innocent people who attend the town's market until Stregobor is compelled by his conscience to come down from his magically inaccessible tower and receive his comeuppance. She has good reason to be utterly furious at the world, but ultimately she is in the wrong for being willing to exact that rage on any and everyone in the path of her vengeance. Geralt finds that he is compelled to choose the path of the lesser evil and kill the girl he has sympathy for in order to save a whole town at that cost. But what compelled him to grunt the market and stoically walk into town and butcher Renfri's crew? Well, you see, in the short story they based this episode on, Renfri's crew are responsible for a massacre that takes place in another market town named Tridem. Her crew took hostage and systematically murdered innocent civilians in order to have their demands of the town's mayor met. This event is referred to as the Tridem Ultimatum, which is clumsily and confusingly referred to by this dude's line.
It's an ultimatum. Get it?
Oh, it's an ultimatum. Okay. What do you mean by that? What is their ultimatum? We weren't told anything about that whole deal in the other market town. So, for the Witcher to just wake up, grunt the market, and choose to slash these guys is a little jarring, as they all seem to be after a guy who kind of deserves it.
Like a fungus.
Also, the fact that Renfri takes Marelka hostage of all people doesn't exactly hurt her moral standing, as it's clearly the right thing to do in this situation. Jokes aside though, as the audience of the show, we have no idea why any of this is happening until Renfri's slightly weirdly timed exposition.
I will kill her. I will kill everyone here until Stregobor comes down.
Oh, that's what he meant. But at least we got an explanation, I guess. But speaking of strange exposition from this woman,
the girl in the woods will be with you always. She is your destiny.
I have no clue why they made her character some sort of soothsayer linking Geralt to Ciri. No clue. Well, I have a clue, but I think it was a bad idea to do so structurally. They needlessly shoved her into this prophetic role to link Geralt to Ciri, which is redundant in the first place as almost everyone else makes the same point, but what's worse is that her foresight doesn't make sense to us without its explanation. In the show, we are never told that children born under the Black Sun, an ominous eclipse, possess minor clairvoyance before they die. This is a point made by Stregobor in the books when he asks Geralt to kill Renfri, a point which they leave out in the show, so yeah, her clairvoyance was confusing at best here. Though I don't entirely hate the fact that the writers chose to increase Renfri's death's impact on Geralt's life, I hated how and perhaps why they did so. Their needless, unexplained shoehorning of her fortune-telling is a fine example of really bad writing as it is, but their thematically linking Ciri to Renfri is worse, because not only is Renfri kind of evil, she was going to kill a whole town to get to one guy, remember. The fact that Geralt feels bad about not saving one princess so he has to save another is just dumb.
The girl in the woods will be with you always. She is your destiny.
And she's not saying what she's saying in this scene to Geralt, she's saying it to us, because without it being said out loud, we wouldn't make the connection between Renfri and Ciri. Not that the show doesn't try other means of linking them either. The show's portrayal of Renfri paints her in a far more sympathetic light than the books do. It attempts to depict Renfri's quest for vengeance in this really reasonable light until the very end, which works until we find out what she's willing to do. So yeah, Geralt kills her. He feels terrible about it throughout the show, and Stregobor lives to be an elf racist another day.
I'll take that, half-breed. Go to hell, you king mongrels!
So anyway, moving on. In the episode I mentioned earlier with the monster that can shapeshift, the writers repeat this obvious telegraphing thing they like to do again for no reason.
Princess!
The creature that's taking the shape of Ciri's kind of godfather is acting so obviously evil that it makes this scene so incredibly boring. He's going around with this needless attitude, and I have no idea why they chose to rob this moment of all of its tension. Remember, this guy even forgets he's supposed to have arthritis and blows his cover because he's frustrated with being nice. Of course, none of this happens in the books, but seeing as we know he's evil, would the scene not have been more effective if his misleading ruse actually worked? If his portrayal of the super sweet caretaker Ciri remembers him to be convinced both Ciri and Dara here, would the audience not feel way more tension as we watch him lead them to danger? Nah, let's just have him act so conspicuously evil that it would take an absolute doofus to not get that he's up to no good. And therein lies the problem. This show thinks its audience is a bunch of idiots. It didn't have enough faith in us to get the picture, so they felt they had to paint and repaint that picture for us until we got a broad, shallow, uninventive, and messy interpretation of what could have been intricate and engaging. This show should 7. Burn, butcher, burn. Elves and elven blood play a central role in this series. Many of the pivotal characters are of elven descent, including Yennefer and Ciri, and the elves' influence in the world of men is vast and at times quite unnerving. Elves in this show, though, are portrayed as no different to humans, save for their pointy ears. They walk like humans, not like Legolas. They fight like humans, definitely not like Legolas, and even talk like humans. Eat. Yes. Eat. 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 Well, sort of. It's unfortunate that the elves are not portrayed as unique or distinct, and what's disappointing further is that they aren't portrayed cohesively either. Is there a perceivable culture that we get to experience? Of course not. I mean, they share a language, I guess, but that seems to be all that unites them against the humans. Well, that and their pointy ears, of course. You know, I got a few clips from the movie Elf for this video just as a joke, but after watching them through, I realized that that movie seemed to illustrate Will Ferrell's elf character as distinct from humans in a far more effective way than this show does, and he's literally just a grown man in a Santa's helper's costume. This show never allows us to see the elves' different nature, their shared facets that contrast them to humankind, so the fact that some humans wish to oppress them makes no sense whatsoever, as most of the time they seem indistinguishable from humans themselves. I guess their lack of difference to humans can be analogous to how real-world racism is just superficial and pointless, but there's a slight problem with that analogy. First, though, I do want to be clear here and say racism is bad. Hey, no, put that Nobel Peace Prize down. I don't deserve it. The problem is that elves are a whole different species to humans that come from a different universe or reality or sphere, as they call it in this series' lore. They are supposed to be different. They have differing customs, and elves generally struggle to fit into the new world that humanity has created, that of agriculture and science and early-stage capitalism. The elves used to live off of nature and magic, not to mention the fact that they live for far longer than humans do, and thus have a different perspective on life, so this increasingly human world feels incompatible to them. With the changes humanity made to this sphere over hundreds of years, elves and humans not so peacefully coexisted, whilst the elves struggled to adapt and survive, and that is what is at the core of the conflict between humans and elves. That and the fact that humans multiply like crazy and may kind of have a propensity towards being a tiny bit greedy from time to time. Sharing is not exactly our strongest suit. Oh, and yeah, we can be super evil towards difference of any kind as well. So elves and humans fight for the same reasons humans fight each other. Survival, power, avarice, hatred, sports. It is not an even fight, and I like the elves as a faction in the Witcher universe, especially in Gwent.
Enough of this farce! Vedrai, Enlay!
Yet I cannot help but feel that the elves genuinely suck at almost everything they do in this show. They're not exactly the most adept fighters.
I've got her! I've got her!
There's only one that seems to be able to cast spells, and she's their leader, and yet they don't exactly do themselves any favors when they choose to ally themselves with people like Warcrime Magoo and Reedguts McGee.
With friends like those, who needs enemies, you know what I'm saying?
But who exactly chose those friends to begin with? Francesca Findabair. Francesca leads a guerrilla faction of the elves named the Scoia'tael, or Squirrel Tails, into failure after failure. Seriously. This woman has zero luck or strategy behind anything and everything she does. She fails when she stupidly listens to an entity called the Deathless Mother, which is a terrible idea on its face, but whatever. She listens to her and allies the elves with Nilfgaard,
the White Flame,
which turns out to be a horrible idea and only leads to suffering, which, hey, that was exactly what the Deathless Mother was after at the end of the day. Who'd have thought? She fails to break away from the fighting and live in peace when she has her baby, which is not exactly her fault, but heavy hangs the crown. She fails to capture Ciri, and who knows what she would do if she got her hands on her anyway. Find Dol Blathanna, I know. How would she do that? And she fails to protect her hubby from Tissaya's Mega Blast with the magic she supposedly knows. And I don't think we even get to see her cast a single effective spell in the whole show bar one, and that spell was likely figuratively easier than taking candy from a baby and like literally a billion times worse.
Way worse.
This whole thing she does in the last fight doesn't hurt anyone important, by the way. All she does in this show is get knocked down.
She's Hen, Cahir, and she belongs with me! We need to get her out of here!
Do this one instance of what might be forbidden fire magic, and commit one of the show's most horrendous atrocities.
What has been need not always be.
And I'll be honest with you here, I lost all sympathy for people I should have seen as the underdogs after this scene. What in the hell were the writers thinking? This act of vengeance is just pure evil. She does the unspeakable here, so it's no wonder the mage Stregobor is so fearful of elves or those with elvish blood. And whilst the dude's name has been brought up, Stregobor was only in like one short story in the books, but the writers decided to make him this semi-regular Slytherin-like elf-racist antagonist to a lot of the characters in the wizarding world of The Witcher. As we discussed in the first episode, he tries to convince Geralt to kill Renfri, whom he's convinced is going to burn the world to the ground.
I'll take that, half-breed. Filthy little mudblood.
He generally feels that elves and women like Renfri possess this power and encountered a woman named Falka, who is related to Ciri, remember, that gave him one or two things to stew over the years, which has led him to being quite bitter about it all.
King Mongrels! Falcon will be waiting for you. Die, abomination!
Ah, the power of hatred. Well, I suppose that's one way to use magic. 8. It's magic. It's not real.
It's magic. It's not real.
But it kinda is in this universe. As cute as that line is, it literally makes no sense in this world of dragons and monsters and spells.
Oh, bye!
Magic is very real in the Witcher universe. People aren't just doing cheap tricks like pulling rabbits out of hats, transporting themselves between boxes, or picking out a designated card out of a deck.
Ta-da!
So yeah, magic is real, and it's incredibly hard to understand in this world.
You turned my friend into a slug.
In this little scene, Geralt walks through this illusory door. Pause. First of all, he didn't even swing his sword at it to check if it was actually an illusory door, so he's a total amateur. But I have an honest question here. Why is he not wearing his cape after he walks through? 'Cause magic, that's why. As you're going to see, it's pretty clear that the writers did not take magic seriously in this show, and yet I can't blame them. From the hard to physically depict mystical settings to the oftentimes strange use of language.
What did you say?
It all can't be easy to put on screen convincingly. The worst thing to try to bring to life, though, must be the actual magical pom-pom spells, as they simply cannot be easy to animate or even direct. To underline that point, magic must also be so hard to write well for the screen as well, especially when it derives from something as ambiguous as chaos as it does in this universe.
I'm not one to waste chaos on frivolous nonsense.
Whatever gave me this chaos.
Reserve your chaos.
We can take the Redanians out if we unite our chaos and trap them in the tunnels.
What did you say?
As hard as all of that may be though, I would have loved if the writers actually took the time to set out some consistent rules for magic in this show, or at the very least, prevent blatant contradictions from taking place like these.
Your hand.
Oh, and by the way, just as a side point, from the very first magic lesson, it's clear to see that Aretuza is on par with Hogwarts in its commitment to being unreasonably dangerous to its own students.
There is no conjuring something from nothing. There is a give and a take.
There is a cost to all creation.
Okay, so what was the cost of this?
This was the first lesson Tissaia taught me.
Why does this not shrivel her hand? Wait a second. When people cast spells in this show, nobody's holding flowers in their hands, so why do their hands not shrivel up? This makes no sense.
It's magic. It's not real.
Right, sure. There's certainly no flower during series first lesson. How does that work? Why make up this rule if you're not going to follow through with it? So your nose bleeds when you do too much magic, or your hair turns white. I know. The source of people's magic is people's chaos, so when you use too much chaos, there's a side effect, or cost. But what does that mean? They keep referring to chaos as if it's this separate thing that people have a personal access to, but it just doesn't sound right. They basically substituted the word power for the word chaos, however I feel the former makes far more sense than the latter. Another thing this show completely makes up is that fire is part of the list of forbidden magics.
Fire magic is off limits for us. You also believe in forbidden magic, demonology, necromancy, fire magic.
I mean, we can all agree that necromancy and demonology are clear no-nos. They're universally forbidden in all sorts of fantasy media. But why fire magic? People do fire magic in the Witcher universe outside of this show all the time. In fact, I don't even think this show believes that fire magic is that forbidden. Is this fire magic right above their fancy ball? This fiery magical ring? Remember, Francesca did this to it, so it's not exactly an illusion. How about when Geralt uses fire magic? That's okay? No? Yes? Don't know? Neither do I.
How could fire magic be any worse? There's always a source. With fire magic, the source is you.
Okay, so drawing from fire is bad then.
It takes something you never get back.
Right. Wait. But this evil mage named Ryans is creating fire, and he's doing it like a 1920s gangster, so we know it's bad. So creating fire is bad too. Or is it? Is moving fire bad? Who knows? So it's an arbitrary rule. So what, right? What I'm getting at here is that the writers had no idea what they were doing with the magic in this show. In the books and games, drawing magic from fire can be dangerous, but that's about it. Geralt has a fire sign. Yennefer and Triss are known to conjure fire spells, so I have no idea why they added this weird limiting rule to the show. To make matters even more confusing though, they never actually go through what each of a Witcher's signs can do, detailing what rudimentary magic or sign a Witcher can perform in comparison to, say, the average sorcerer. But make no mistake, they most certainly couldn't decide on what the average sorcerer was capable of either, because they seem to be able to do both everything and nothing, all at once. Geralt is a horseback sniper that's able to take out a spectral assailant from far away in one scene, but can't push these dweebs over with what is seemingly the same sign in another. Magic initiates graduate by catching lightning in a bottle, but seem to struggle doing the most basic things both before and after that. The sorcerers of Nilfgaard, because they are bad people, remember, conjure enormous fireballs to be launched from trebuchets. But these fireballs that they literally sacrifice their whole ass lives to cast can just be deflected, no problem. What sort of system is this? Who okayed this? Why is Fringilla on board with this type of use of magic? It's so wasteful. The good guy mages tend to just be able to throw force at each other or do a pose and twist people up. Or wait, fine. There's Triss who has the power of summoning vines and leaves, but come on, there has to be more to magic than this. There has to be a middle ground between forbidden fire magic fireballs and bushomancy. It's inconsistent as well as just plain stupid. Fire evil, but grenades not evil, I guess. Killing is fine, but only if it's done with force magic. Remember, in this universe, you can eat someone's flesh and another person can read your guts to locate someone, but it never gets done again. So wait, maybe it's just a one-time spell or something. But I've missed something out here. Something that happens at the end of season 1 that proves that there is no stronger power than that of the magic of believing in yourself and being a main character. All these other mages prove to be completely useless in the battle that takes place at the end of season 1. Oh look, he ran out of swords on his 4th try. What a really effective way to use magic. Oh, sorry. Use chaos. But anyway, in that finale, things seem hopeless. Until our main character levels up.
Let your chaos explode.
Oh my god, she's become Fire Lord Ozai. Her magic teacher told her to let her chaos explode, and look at what she did. Wait a minute. If she could have defeated all of her enemies in a second with a sprinkle of belief, then why the hell didn't she just lead with that and save everyone on her side a bunch of suffering? Because they were playing by the good guy rules? This is somehow civil? I'm being serious, why couldn't she have done this earlier? What, she needed more time to reserve her chaos or something? She spent this whole fight calling shots from a tower like a coach kind of uselessly, which, wouldn't you know, turned out to be the perfect way for the writers to pad out the runtime of the episode until she gets to do her super omega firebending. Yeah, fine, it was enough time for a big enough fire to happen for her to draw from, but come on, that's just dumb as balls. Seriously, look at her control. She doesn't even burn her allies. This is insanely good magic work. It's like the most heroic act in all of the continent's history. She's surely going to be held in high regard amongst all of the Northern Kingdoms after the greatest act of magic ever known, right? Oh, you Witcher writers, you guys are the best. But I say that whilst I haven't even gotten to their greatest feat of writing yet. Because we gotta talk about the eels. Yeah, you heard me. Eels. Some certifiable genius on the writing staff thought it was a great idea to alter the lore of this universe and make it so that initiate sorceresses who can't control magic very well get turned into eels. No, they don't need more training or anything, they just get morphed into these incandescent glowworms against their will because... well, I actually don't know why. Sorcerers are just full-on evil, I guess? I mean, this turning people into eel thing happens so often that they even have a dedicated eel-shoving stick in this room.
Come, push your friend into the pool.
Which is crazy when you think about it. But anyway, don't you agree that this whole eel concept is some really clever writing? I'll explain. You see, the institute where all these people learn magic just so happens to be where all the magic elite convene. It's at an academy named Aretuza. When people fail their final magic test, they get turned into eels to act as kind of conduits for chaos.
What is this place? Aretuza's windmill. Enough bridled chaos to keep the curtains hung. And the torches lit.
Why is an eel a better conduit for chaos than a human? What sort of question is that? Seriously, have you not heard of an electric eel? You know what? Never mind. You're just a stupid idiot fool who asks too many stupid idiot fool questions. You know nothing. The eels make it so that Aretuza has a kind of perpetual magic battery at its base. Wow, look at it glow. That's so creative. This whole eel thing as a concept just works in this dark and cruel world, doesn't it? Yeah, no. Not until you think about why they would even need to do it. Sorcerers are all competent with magic, or harnessing chaos, or whatever you want to call it. So why have a nuclear power plant of eels in a pool at the base of the building? What's all that power for? They don't tap into it, or at the very least refer to tapping into it in either of the magical fights of the show, so its purpose truly confuses me. To make matters worse, all the powerful mages don't actually live at Aretuza. They travel the continent swaying geopolitics to their favor, so it makes no sense for the writers to have done this. Unless the secret to learning magic is the power of eel! Ugh, nothing makes sense. 9. Yennefer and Cahir, and how nothing ever makes sense and nothing is ever earned. This powerful moment at the end of Season 1, where Geralt and Ciri meet and hug for the first time, is unearned. Why is she running into the arms of a stranger? The romance between Jaskier and Radovid is not earned either, and is awful. The way Ciri's elder blood can supposedly create more Witchers is a stupid idea that the writers made up for this show and is awful, and is a change to the source material that is wholly unearned. And yeah, did I mention that it was awful? Gallatin's presence in that last season was, yep, you guessed it, awful. To spend a whole season and some change building up a villain who can click fire into existence, who has worn away his soul with forbidden fire magic, and who relentlessly chases Ciri everywhere, only to kill him so profoundly unceremoniously, is, in a word, demented. There doesn't ever seem to be a natural progression to things in this show. There's no coherent cause and effect to the action of characters. To make matters worse, they just tend to survive incredibly dangerous situations by virtue of having their roles performed by some of the first few people listed in the credits on IMDb. The writers were in such a rush to check things off a list that they were incapable of letting things happen organically. At the same time, the amount of fluff they added to pad out the runtime of each episode meant that they had even less time to develop key relationships or plot points that are going to be crucial for the story moving forward. Some of that fluff they made up lay in direct contradiction to what was already set to take place, so they ended up having to contradict their very own contradictions, which takes even more time away from what they were supposed to adapt in the first place. Cahir is this fanatically evil commander that pretty much enjoys shedding blood. Well, no he isn't. He was just following orders, the poor guy.
In the attack in Sintra when I took you, I did everything I was asked with no hesitation, but now I can't stop asking questions.
Characters change their motivations and perspectives on things seemingly on a whim, and I can't really understand why nothing is ever left to breathe or remain consistent logically or otherwise. The result of all this rush and all those contradictions is that nothing feels authentic and no narrative moments feel earned.
I deserve my destiny.
Vital plot points and themes must have at least the appearance of being organic for us to come along for the ride and enjoy and accept them. Heroes' journeys don't feel fulfilling if the protagonist is already incredibly powerful, or just flawless from the start of the story and has nowhere to go or nothing to do and no capacity for growth. There's just no journey there. Redemption stories cannot work when a character shows no remorse or regret. They just don't work if characters are not given enough time or even the motivation to seek that redemption. And so we have Cahir, who commits war crime after war crime and finds himself in so many life-threatening situations, only to be saved relentlessly by randomly merciful main characters or just dumb luck. For the life of me, I cannot understand why this guy makes it through so many moments where he genuinely deserves to die, because, believe me, he's the worst. There's actually a point in this show where he kills a whole room full of people because it's simply more convenient than the really easy alternative. To explain, he thinks there's a shape-shifting monster in the room with him, hiding amongst a few strangers. Now, remember, silver hurts monsters if they touch it, and there's a silver knife just in the other room. But, as he says,
a simple test of silver would have sufficed.
I had steel at the ready.
So he just kills all the people in that room. He commissions the use of this world's version of weapons of mass destruction and leads an invasion force that massacres an entire city. He kills someone the show says he's supposedly close to, which we'll get to in a second, and his very purpose in this show is to kidnap a princess, the main character, Ciri. This guy is pure evil from the moment we meet him. He's a vile jerk that holds zero value for human life and blindly follows orders until the most hilarious inversion of a character's motivation there ever was. Does he suffer for his evil actions? Sure, a tiny bit. What an overreactor. This guy must play football or something. Okay, fine. He does get fingers shoved into his brain for like a minute, but then he goes back to his old evil shenanigans the moment he gets set free. It's confounding to me why he was written into this evil path with no clear moments to create sympathy for him. We never get to see his steely conviction shaken by the evil things he does to regular people, so this guy comes across as a heartless killer. He does everything with a smile, all for the white flame. The writers immediately write him out of situations he wasn't meant to be in the first place, but in doing so, he never gets to suffer the true consequences of his actions. Why? Well, because he's a supporting character throughout the Witcher books, that's why. They gave him the characteristics of a main villain, but now, after season 3, he's gonna get a redemption arc, if the show even lasts long enough to do so. Cahir was in no way as evil as this in the books, by the way. He was from Nilfgaard, sure, but he was actually quite an honorable knight, whose orders were merely to retrieve the Princess Cirilla and bring her back to her father, Emir. But that's it. He had no massacres or war crimes to absolve himself of. Could Cahir be as straightforward as a character in this show? Of course. Would that have been better? Of course. Yet instead, we get the little murder machine that could. The embarrassing thing about this all is that it's Yennefer of all people who helps him out of one of the many pickles within which he finds himself. That's right, Yennefer. The whole subplot of Cahir's execution just made zero sense. You see, Yennefer gets accused of being a spy for Nilfgaard after she mysteriously goes missing at the end of Season 1.
Court of blood.
I prefer Hero of Sodden.
Heroes don't go mysteriously missing for a month after battle.
You know, it's telling that you don't understand such complex concepts as prisoners of war.
So the way they ask her to prove that she was a prisoner that escaped captivity instead of being a spy that gets turned in like a month is to kill the guy who was leading the army of the massive battle she just risked her life in and pretty much won by herself in favor of her accusers. Like, yeah, they tell her that she has to be the one to hold the axe and chop off his head and all, because that's somehow what proves you're innocent of being a spy. What was that, you ask? Why does she have to kill him with an axe and not magic? Well, I actually don't know why the mages want her to use an axe, but it sure as hell is convenient for her at this point, because she can't perform magic anymore for God knows what reason.
Use some magic!
I know, fire magic, bloody blue, whatever. Don't worry, she gets it back just as arbitrarily as she loses it.
I felt it come back when I...
And you sacrificed yourself for Ciri.
But anyway, yeah, killing the guy she doesn't know and should probably hate would prove that she's not a spy, supposedly. I hope this sounds just as stupidly easy to you as it does to me. I mean, even if she was a spy and knew Cahir intimately, the spy thing to do would be to kill him to maintain your cover. Yet even if we granted that this sort of test or punishment made sense logically, which it doesn't, the show has the audacity to make her refuse to carry out this incredibly understandable execution because, well, again, I actually don't know.
To prove your innocence, you will have to kill the Nilfgaardian prisoner.
Is it which will prove what?
That you are not a spy!
Or that I am a killer!
I'm sorry to break this to you, Yennefer, but burning people to a crisp using forbidden fire magic is in fact a form of killing, even when you do it to hundreds of people at a time. In fact, especially when you do it to hundreds of people at a time. You're kinda like the biggest killer in this show by far. Now, if you dare to assume that Yennefer as a character doesn't want to kill someone who doesn't pose an immediate threat to her, or that she is somehow squeamish about killing a defenseless man, just bear in mind that this is a woman who later in this very season is going to sacrifice an innocent girl she doesn't know to an entity called the Deathless Mother for her own personal gain. Yennefer is a cold, calculating, selfish, and prideful character, so even if you were to make the argument that she doesn't want to be ordered to kill someone else and refuses to do so on principle, then why do the writers of this show make Yennefer set Cahir free? She could have run off by herself and escaped her accusations, leaving the war criminal behind for someone else to execute, because, I'll emphasize again, he really deserved to die there. But no. She saves him instead.
Why save me?
Don't flatter yourself. I'm saving me.
Not really, that makes no sense. You're quite plainly making things worse for everyone.
I set a prisoner free, and in doing so I set the entire North against the Brotherhood.
The real reason why they made Yennefer do this incredibly out of character and senselessly stupid thing is because this is a bad, poorly thought out and lazily written show that does not understand its characters. Cahir was meant to have a redemption arc, so he needed to live, despite everything. So this terrible escape follows, and people just watch them leave. No one runs after them. There are no guards blocking the exits. They just ride off together, and it's as unceremonious as it is unconvincing. Cahir and Yennefer escape together and then stay together for who knows what reason. Somehow, they get their hands on the loudest colored capes possible to be as conspicuous as possible, because fashion, I guess. They finally go their separate ways, and Cahir continues to be incredibly naughty, escaping certain death scenarios now and then, as you do, continuing his fanatical loyalty to the Emperor until we get to the point where he realizes that he's the baddie all along.
Are we the baddies?
Oh, don't worry. The writers went the extra mile here to make this all convincing and logically consistent, as this is a key turning point for one of the show's main characters. What could change such a determined man's mind, you ask? Well, you see, he's forced to kill a close, dear old friend of his to prove his loyalty to the Empire. Does that make sense? No, but wait a second. What's with people having to kill people to prove their loyalty anyway? Like people that don't matter. It makes no sense. But what's that, you ask? Cahir hasn't been shown to have any personal connections in this show? What are you talking about? What about his best pal, Smoky Voice McNinety show? Yeah, I thought so. You forgot about him, didn't you? Cahir has to stab his old friend in the neck, a guy that would actually prove to be super useful to the Empire, all things considered, but does it matter if the killing makes sense?
Gallatin is a good fighter. He knows the land and the elves are loyal to him. He can deliver us the north.
All that matters is that we care deeply about this whole ordeal, as this is the one bad thing that Cahir actually feels really, really bad about, because they're old friends.
Where are you going? To get help from an old friend.
Oh, did I mention that? These two are old friends.
Oh, friend. Your men hold you in the same regard, even if you are an old, ugly, arrogant prick. Gallatin. You are one of the finest soldiers I've ever fought beside.
See? They're old friends. They keep saying it, so it must be true. Oh, what a heart-wrenching scene to see him kill his old friend, who we've never seen him interact with before this season, and who, if you really think about it, he could not have actually known for any longer than a year, because this guy lives in a completely different continent, but it's tragic nonetheless. If the sarcasm isn't registering here, let me be clear. These two do not have any bond. They are not old friends, and this poor excuse for a friendship is by no means a convincing one. No matter how many times they call each other old friend, they haven't shared the screen for long enough by this point for this contrivance of a plot point to work. Not only does the killing come across as cruel and senseless, 20 minutes before this, he was totally on board with his absolute leader, the guy who ordered the assassination of a baby of one of his allies. And this is where he loses his faith in him? I shall repeat the point because it's baffling, but 2 seasons of utter mischief ago, Cahir killed a room full of people and felt fine about it. But let's just take it for granted that Cahir and Gallatin somehow developed a deep bond during the year and a bit that these two have been in the north together. Fine. He's distraught after killing his old friend, so he leaves the Empire and never comes back, right? No, wait, that's too abrupt. Instead, he first leads a secret ambush on the home base of the wizards. A fight that leads to countless deaths, and a moment like this, by the way. And then Fringilla, who has by this point left the Empire herself, yet was in cahoots with Cahir for 2 seasons before this, says this to him in the middle of the fight.
I'm simply no longer confined, Cahir. You know, it is amazing what you can do when you think for yourself.
2 seconds later.
I've discovered I was wrong.
Just to be clear here, she tells the guy to think for himself one single time and that's it. He leaves. He runs off and of course fast travels to where Ciri is, even though he should have no idea of her whereabouts and has been ineffectively chasing after this girl for 3 whole seasons. He throws the fight against her and blames every horrible thing he's done on just following orders. And wouldn't you know it? He's allowed to live. Ciri should have just killed him right there, if not for her sake, then for the sake of our brains not falling out of our ears. And I mean that. Whether he's defenseless or not, she should have killed him here. Not only does he literally ask for it, but he's the guy that's chased her up and down the continent, causing her nightmares and so much sorrow. He killed her kind of grandpa, led the war that pretty much killed her grandma and blew up her entire city, but she lets him live. This isn't the sort of world where good people don't take lives. Geralt kills people, Yennefer kills people, and even Ciri has killed people by this point. So Ciri not taking his life here is not some character-defining moment. It's just a way the writers were able to keep a main character from the books alive despite their writing him into the corner of all corners as someone that's completely unworthy of forgiveness. Just because he feels bad about killing his old friend doesn't mean he doesn't deserve to be punished for it. He just gets away with everything he does time and time and time again. And that's what frustrates me. People get away with doing really nasty stuff all the time in this show. Which takes me to Yennefer. Yennefer. Oh, Yennefer. I've kind of avoided talking about her so much in this video because I don't quite know where I stand with her. I'm not entirely a fan of how they wrote her at times, but what's strange is that after 3 seasons of this show butchering the character I respect so much from the books, I definitely don't hate Netflix's interpretation of her. Though it's non-canonical and it's riddled with flaws and it sometimes makes no sense whatsoever, I definitely don't hate her character, and I can only chalk this lack of hatred up to how she's portrayed by the actress and maybe a lingering sense of loyalty I have to the Yennefer from the books and games. Yennefer of Vengerberg is a complicated character to say the least, so I can see why it was difficult to bring her to life on the stream screen. A writer for The Witcher 3 once said it was hard to write for Yennefer as she is quite a shrewish character, and I gotta say I don't disagree. To me, it's not quite clear whether the audience is actually meant to like her entirely, or perhaps also meant to question Geralt's infatuation with her, or at the very least understand that the love he feels for her is unknowable unless we walk a mile in his wolf-bebuckled boots. Cause she's kinda hard to understand or even empathize with. She can be overly harsh, overly selfish, domineering and overbearing. In fact, in one of the few short stories that features her, she is compared to this elven ice queen, leaving shards of ice behind her as she travels the land. We never get a clear backstory to Yennefer in the books. The show dedicates a large portion of its first season to her background, which isn't a mistake on paper until you see how confused its delivery is. To the show's credit, it did take inspiration from a few little hints of her past found in the text, which honestly is quite an accomplishment. But the bigger accomplishment here is how they were able to mess up what they completely fabricated for themselves. So, she was ugly when she was younger. Taken from the books? Perfect. They take her ugliness and make it a source of her indignation towards others as she was mistreated terribly for it when she was younger. Not a bad choice. But honestly, the moment she gets taken from her own version of the cupboard under the stairs to the magical academy, her looks don't seem to matter from that point onwards. She is treated no differently than the other students except for being called Piglet by her rectress.
Piglet.
Which we'll get into in a sec. She even almost instantly finds a love interest in the sorcerer Istred, which is somewhat of a contradictory choice for the writers to have come up with, don't you think? Because you see, she receives his love before her transformation into an astonishing beauty, which sort of undercuts her very motivation for the physical change she ends up going through with. I say undercut though, not completely eliminate, because I get it. Istred loves her, or at the very least maintains feelings for her throughout the series despite the many changes she goes through and the utterly stupid things she says.
Do you know whose skulls these are?
Dead people?
They don't go into how or why he feels the way he does for her, or even why he's attracted to her, as she's honestly quite unsightly to start with, and he isn't. Yet he just immediately acts with this tenderness towards her that seems completely unwarranted and wholly different to what she's experienced throughout her entire life thus far. They pump on the regular, in secret, and get to know each other intimately to the point that they fight over who or what she will become.
A life holding dustpans while you brush off forgotten bones. It's not destiny.
You're just angry because you lost your chance to be beautiful! Seen and adored with everyone watching.
Istred has this scathing insight into her character, for he sees her wanting to be adored as the root of all of her problems, which is reinforced by what Tisea says here.
Your worst fear makes such sense. Even if you were a beauty, still no one would love you.
And yeah, there's no talking about Yennefer without mentioning Tisea de Vries and their genuinely confusing relationship. I say it's confusing as it goes through a jarringly sudden transformation that the show provides little to no evidence for. It starts with Tisea being needlessly cruel to the hunchbacked uggo that is Yennefer pre-makeover. She calls her Piglet because she first finds her in a pig pen, which is sweet, don't you think?
How much for this beast? That's adorable, Piglet. Lost a lot of blood, Piglet.
She basically tells Yennefer that she's useless all the time, even during times when Yennefer is really struggling.
Sometimes a flower is just a flower. And the best thing it can do for us is to die. Do you know how many people wouldn't blink if you died?
Oh, come on, Tisea. This poor girl doesn't need tough love, she just needs regular love. If you didn't push her so much, then maybe she wouldn't feel worthless and do things like this. Or wait, maybe that's why she was pushing her so much. But all of a sudden, their dynamic suddenly shifts from all that cruelty to Yennefer being Tisea's favorite pupil out of nowhere. They say things to each other like, "Your pain is my pain,"
Your pain is my pain.
And push your friend into the pool, and you were one of my best students.
Teaching you has been the biggest bright spot of my life.
She said you're the best student she ever taught.
Sure, she was one of your best students.
Cellulite.
You lie. You keep secrets. You succumb to emotion, to weakness. And tonight, you almost killed someone else.
2 seconds later.
Teaching you has been the biggest bright spot of my life.
This transition in their relationship doesn't feel natural, and yeah, it doesn't feel earned either. But what the hell, at least it's carried decently by these two actresses. Their dynamic remains pretty consistent from there on out throughout the rest of the show, which is something, I guess. Tissaia persistently acts as the wind beneath Yennefer's wings through the rest of the show and gets Yennefer out of trouble all the time, so I've got to admit that outside of the romance Yennefer has with Geralt, it's her relationship with Tissaia that's the second most convincing. Yennefer's sympathetic backstory, though told kind of clumsily, serves as a clear foundation for who she develops into, but that's about as much credit as I can give the writers here because so much else they've added about her doesn't work. For starters, they don't give her a chance to develop any meaningful relationships outside of her two romantic ones or the whole mother-daughter thing she's got going on with her magical headmistress, Tissaia De Vries. They missed out on the opportunity to give her some genuine friendships when she was a magic initiate at the beginning of the show. Aretuza was like the place to develop friendships, rivalries, or whatever. But alas, she befriends none of these people in any tangible way. They could have given her a closer relationship with Fringilla at least, which would have elevated moments of tension between them when they ended up being on the opposite sides of a war, but no, they didn't even do that. The one person she seems somewhat friendly towards in the later seasons turns out to be the person this is her only meaningful interaction with in season 1. Oh, and this. Perhaps maybe a single substantial line of dialogue with Sabrina before the final episode of season 1 would have helped build some semblance of a relationship between them, but hey, what's the point of building up character dynamics at all, huh? Their bond feels underdeveloped at best, and that's the most I can say about her relationships, because everyone else bar 1 or 2 people just hate her or think she's beautiful, and that's all. Sometimes she doesn't feel like a real, well-formed, living character, but rather more of an idea or a plot device. She gets transplanted into different scenes, elicits whatever reactions the writers want out of her, and then is just ripped out of that context and dropped into another one to drive the plot along. Why is it that her letting Cahir escape in front of all of the leaders of the Northern Realms is just glossed over? Do we even get to see this guy again? The overall direction for her character in this show remains pretty unclear, which is not a bad thing itself, except that the show clearly wants her to be more central to the plot, when really she's meant to be tangential and supplemental to it at best. So her character suffers under the scrutiny of having a spotlight placed on her when it should never have been in the first place. Sure, she has her motivations. I mean, this line turns out to be quite illuminating for her character.
You're just angry because you lost your chance to be beautiful!
I want to be powerful.
Seen and adored with everyone watching.
It is what I'm owed.
There we have it. She wishes to be powerful rather than beautiful. But, as you've guessed it, the writers contradict or at the very least undermine even that. You see, she has the realization that all the power broking she wished so much to be a part of was just monotonous and unfulfilling.
I love that I traded everything to get my seat at court.
She could have and indeed should have loved it and wanted something more. I mean, couldn't that have been a reasonable path to take her character? No, that in fact is too feminist, how dare you? So she comes to the conclusion that she wants to focus her energies on her legacy. This innately comes in the form of wanting a baby, but due to what took place in the academy, she's unable to have them anymore. She, of course, blames the system at large for this, evidenced best by her speech on the beach.
And let's face it, you're a girl. We're just vessels for them to take and take until we're empty.
So count yourself lucky. You've cheated the game, won without even knowing it.
You know, the system that bought her power and privilege and elevated her lifestyle to a level she couldn't have ever dreamt of when she was Pig Pen Yen. But hey, to her, the institution at Aretusa sucks. Because, well, why do they suck? She has reasons for hating the Brotherhood of Sorcerers, but they don't seem to coincide with who she is as a character. She doesn't hate them for their scheming or their ruthless politicking. She hates them because they want to control her, and not even in the most intrusive of ways. She doesn't hate the fact that they want to control other things and other people, by the way, and she was all aboard their mission when she first started out. So she's not against the Academy's ideology, but the fact that that ideology just affects her. Which, probing further, you have to ask, does the Brotherhood of Sorcerers or even its rules even affect her? She gets away with using forbidden fire magic. She gets away with running away from her position as a court-appointed sorceress. She gets away with not decapitating war crime Fark Magizaks, so where is this control they exert on her? Well, the show would lead you to believe that it all started with the Ascension. The process which the Academy refers to as the Ascension, where the graduating magical initiates get transformed into beautiful sorceresses by second-hand Bill Nye, is something that takes away their ability to have children.
There is a cost to all creation.
Everything has a cost, you say. Something must be given up for this transformation, huh?
To be reborn, you will bear no more.
So perhaps this is what she hates so much. But hold on, this process seems entirely voluntary. In fact, she somewhat forces her way into this procedure without permission and even without sedatives.
You claim to be quite the artist. Prove it.
I need time to prepare the herbs.
That won't be necessary.
Don't be foolish. You can't be awake during the procedure.
I can.
She literally chooses to give up her reproductive capacities in order to become beautiful and attend the really poorly done magical ball, and I have no idea why anybody would want to attend this thing, but anyway. In the books, and I may be mistaken here because I'm not a Witcher scholar or anything, but I believe they say that reproductive organs atrophy as a result of magic use, and not due to some choice or imposition an individual or the Academy makes respectively. But the show went on the analogy direction, so I can't blame Yennefer for making an issue out of something she did willingly. I can only blame the people behind this show because it was them that made this so unclear. To get this straight, the show chose to tie Yennefer's infertility to an active, vanity-driven trade-off rather than an unfortunate passive circumstance of being magically gifted. The reasons behind all of that could have proven intriguing if they developed them further, but of course they didn't. So instead, this alteration, just like so many others, feels flat, as nothing interesting comes of it. Now, sure, the writers could have devoted the runtime of its many introductory episodes to other things, but if they chose to insert this analogy to the patriarchy here, why not make it more patriarchal? Could this sterilization not have been a completely unnecessary procedure that the female initiates are forced into, like the Black Widows are from the Marvel movies? Oh, right, yeah. Tisea admits that it was her idea to make new sorceresses infertile so that their loyalties wouldn't be divided. How lovely.
When I came to Aretusa, if a sorceress fell pregnant, she was kicked out. Divided loyalties. So I made them take us seriously. The enchantment was never about clearer access to chaos. It was about getting a seat at the table. And the Brotherhood, they called me bold.
They actually did this. It was her idea to make new sorceresses infertile so that their loyalties won't be divided, and then they gave her a seat on the council for that. Wow! Could they not have made the Ascension they force women to do, or convince them to take part in order to access chaos or something? Also, what I don't understand about this all is that Yennefer is a really talented sorceress. Why could she not transform herself? I mean, in the books, sorceresses drink elixirs to become beautiful, and fine, in the show, the Ascension is what does that, but Yennefer is like the best magical student ever. Why can't she have done her own transformation? Because they didn't think magic through, obviously. But let's not get lost in the weeds. She sacrificed her ability to have kids for beauty, not power, and them's her breaks. Cool. The consistency isn't entirely there, but let's just leave it at that. What matters is that she can't have a biological child because of a choice she made as a young, ugly magical adept. A choice that she did not understand the consequences of. Fine.
We're just vessels.
She goes off on this rant about women being seen as merely vessels by the Academy and everyone in general. She's giving this rant to a recently dead baby, by the way. She even tells the poor little thing that being born a girl is kind of a fate worse than death and that the kid got off easy.
And let's face it, you're a girl. So count yourself lucky. You've cheated the game, won without even knowing it.
Okay, but in the very next episode we see that she's attempting to make herself a literal vessel for a genie so that she can have power and beauty and everything! And maybe also perhaps be a vessel for a baby?
She wants to be the vessel.
I mean, please tell me this feels a little muddled and confused to you as well. Yennefer goes from being all like, ugh, this is awful, being a woman is trash, bearing children is the only thing they want from you, to wanting a baby in the span of a single episode with no other inciting events other than this woman saying this.
To this baby, I am the whole world.
That and the fact that she's lost her ability to have kids, so it's a kind of wanting things you can't have sort of situation. Like ice cream when you have a sugar condition. We get no time for her to develop this feeling of emptiness or wanting something more. It's just there when it so easily could have been alluded towards before this. There's no scene as a young adept in Aretuza when she speaks of wanting to be a good mother someday who would raise her child with love, no matter what the baby looks like or even what it is. This would have immediately increased the stakes of her transformation, as she clearly wanted to have children before this decision, which would have amplified her regrets afterwards. There's no setup and payoff. There's just things that happen in this show because the writing is just zero-dimensional. Oh no, I gotta tell you something, Yennefer. That something more you've always wanted? The thing you were destined for? It's a girl! Speaking of setup and payoff and kids and whatnot, Yennefer shares with Cahir an unearned redemption. Not only did the writers muddle up her backstory, but they also messed up her story by thinking it was a swell idea for her to try and sacrifice the girl who, soon after this attempt on her life, takes on the role of her adopted daughter.
We were in trouble and needed help, and you betrayed us. I was stupid, and I was selfish. You have to come with me. Now!
Sure, she repents the fact that she betrays Ciri, but she only does so at the last possible second and after she's been called out for it, no less. She repents, guards fast travel over to them all the way from the castle before they can even reach their own horses, and Geralt himself fast travels in to the rescue before Ciri gets to ride off to the Witcher's stronghold. During that journey though, Ciri's body gets taken over by the demon that Yennefer had made a deal with. Possessed Ciri kills a bunch of Geralt's somewhat family who are also her friends by this point to no consequence, not to Ciri, not to Yennefer, and not even to the demon witch thing that possessed her and actively killed all those dudes. She actually gets set free and cackles all the way home. It's a pretty wholesome end to her story when you think about it. She got all the pain and suffering she wanted, and then she got to go home. How lovely. The Witchers are a dying breed, and their deaths should take a toll on everyone. The fact that many die as a consequence of Yennefer's actions is horrible, but is there even a second of reflection on this? Of course not. Soon after this, Ciri and Yennefer are just giggling with one another like nothing has ever happened between them. And though Geralt says this,
I don't forgive you, Yennefer.
all Yennefer gets as punishment for all the craziness she's gotten away with are a few pats shot at her by the Witcher before even he forgives her and falls in love with her all over again in the span of a single episode. Fine, this whole process takes like 5 months or something, but come on, she knew Ciri was Geralt's child of destiny and still went forward with kidnapping her regardless. It's this sort of irredeemable behavior that I cannot understand. She lied to his face and stole his kid, and it's all good from there. If the writers wanted to make her do something desperate to get her powers that she mysteriously lost back, great, fine, change the source material a whole bunch, but make those changes have actual impact. Yet the show can't fathom the idea of consequences. I know they only had a few episodes to work with, but within those constraints, they should have figured out a way to make their material work, or why bother shoehorning all this nonsense in the first place? They purposefully avoided having Ciri have any feeling towards almost being sacrificed or being possessed by a demon and killing her friends for obvious reasons. This little sentence is pretty much all that comes of it.
You say magic isn't everything, but you were willing to trade my life for it.
I know, because I'd given up. But I'll never make that mistake again.
They clearly ignored exploring this topic further because even in moments when Yennefer and Ciri are fighting with each other, it never gets brought up. The writers didn't want it brought up because it's unforgivable. In fact, their needless insertions would have led to too many branching plot points, so they just throw them out the window, and all that evil stuff is just water under the bridge for these two. It's all smiles and laughs for them after all the horrible events that took place. But what's not all smiles and laughs is 10. Henry Cavil has left the show. And that's it, really. I was going to make this segment about how Henry Cavill was booted off this show for being this toxic gamer that wanted the writing to be accurate to the books, but it doesn't matter. This Witcher obviously didn't work for me, but season 1 was a big success for Netflix supposedly. So hey, what do I know? I want to say though that I can't imagine that this series survives the main actor's departure, as his star power must have been a big draw for its success, but only time will tell. And I guess time told. They are wrapping up this show after 2 more seasons when there's just so much more material for them to go through. I guess Cavill's departure did make a difference, but maybe this was the plan all along. Look, hopefully this sort of hit to the show can serve as a lesson to the showrunners to not play so fast and loose with the adaptation of a beloved property. But this sort of poor handling of wonderful source material will happen again, and already has. I have zero faith that Netflix studios will go forward from this and adapt properties in a faithful and respectful manner, as all that matters to them is cashing in on the popularity of a franchise rather than elevating that franchise to a new level or giving it the sort of treatment it deserves. But hey, let's not get too distracted. This is a video about one of my favorite fantasy properties and how its Netflix adaptation was just a jumble of contradictions. Who knows what's in store for all these misunderstood, poorly portrayed characters of the Witcher universe and the loosely adapted story they're only like a third of the way through by now? One thing I can say for certain though is that I am not going to continue watching this show, even though it's going to be really amusing to see how Liam Hemsworth is going to replace Henry Cavill with a supposedly in-universe explanation. But just as Henry Cavill has left the show, I must leave it to rest in peace as well. Look, as you can probably tell, I could have gone on and on and on about this, but I think it's safe to say that I've said enough at this point. The Witcher is a show that I don't think anyone involved in the production of cared for, save perhaps Henry Cavill, who had the wherewithal to leave, albeit after 3 seasons. Sloppy writing and poor decisions at the studio led to a show that just did not measure up to the huge potential there was going for it, as this could have been an all-time classic. It's just sad that we got this trash-tier effort on Netflix's part instead of a coherent, carefully crafted epic fantasy. For you see, there's something extraordinarily alluring about the world of The Witcher that Netflix failed to capture here. There's a particularly unique brand of political complexity and intrigue that flows alongside all of the thematic intensity of racism and colonialism and sexism and nationalism and all the isms really. All of that is underscored by a markedly Eastern European pseudo-pessimism, juxtaposed with an equally Eastern European hardy outlook on such dark contexts that never once is even close to being brought to the screen in this show. This should have been a dark, compelling, complex tale about power and prejudice, about heroism in the face of moral ambiguity, and most importantly, about monster slaying shrouded in tragic and gruesome circumstance. Instead, what we got is this tonally inconsistent mess, riddled with contradictions and thoughtless reinventions that looks kind of off at the best of times. It was a true Netflix adaptation to its core, I guess. What a shame. And that's it. That's all I've got the energy to say. If you've made it this far, I would like to thank you for watching, truly. If you have any agreements or disagreements with what I've had to say, drop them in the comment section below. I would actually love to see what you guys have to say about this video because it's my first one, so please hit me up. Don't forget to like and subscribe because I'm going to be coming out with more videos on a variety of topics coming soon, so stay tuned. Also, follow all the links below. Once again, thanks for watching. I'm the Eternal, and I'll see you on the next one. Take it easy. But what's worse is that her foresight doesn't make sense to... You know, killing the evil dude who killed a bunch of her friends who all...